I will now take the Southern by roll call. The following councillors are present. Councillors Alec Allison, John Bradley, Archie Buchanan. I have apologies from Councillor Stephanie Callaghan, and Councillor Josh Wilson is attending as a substitute. Following councillors are also present. Councillors Margaret Cowie, Peter Craig, Maureen Devlin, Mary Donnelly, Isabel Dorman, Fiona Dryborough, Lindsay Hamilton. I have apologies from Councillor Ian Harrow, and Councillor Jared Watt is attending as a substitute. Councillor Mark Horsham is also in attendance. Councillor Anne LeBlond.
Put our apologies in, please, Stuart.
Thank you. Following members are also present. Councillors Martin Lennon, Councillor Richard Lockhart. I have apologies from Councillor Joe Lowe. Councillor David McLaughlin.
Here.
Councillor Lynn Nayland is present. Councillor Carol Nugent.
Hi, Stuart.
Following councillors are also present. Councillors John Ross, Councillor Graham Scott, Councillor David Shearer.
Here.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Colette Stevenson and Councillor John Anderson is attending as a substitute. Councillor Bert Thompson. And Councillor Jim Wartot is also present. I've also noted the officers who are present and understand that a member of the press is present for today's proceedings. Thank you, and I'll now pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Do you have any declarations of interest?
Yes, Richard Lockhart here, item 8.
Thank you, Richard. And what's your interest?
Known to both parties.
Okay, thank you. And can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting submitted for approval as the correct record? And they're on pages 5 to 10.
Agreed.
Chair.
Lindsay, you've got your hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I have a just a clarification on a comment that you made at the start of the meeting? You said that if you had any questions, you were able to ask them prior to the committees, to the planning officers. Just clarification on what you meant on that, because as far as I was concerned, a committee is where you ask questions, not prior to it.
No, if you've got any questions, you can ask them prior to the planning officer. You can also ask them at committee, but it's just if you ask them prior to that, and then the planning officer's aware of questions that might be coming up and can have the answers prepared. But you can still ask them at the committee, it's not a problem.
Okay, I would just to note that's quite a strange comment to make. I've not really heard it made at any committee prior to this, so just to clarify, you are to be open and transparent about things, then I think they should be asked at committee rather than prior to the committee, especially in terms of things to do with planning. Just to ask for clarification on that. Thanks, Isabel.
Okay, Lindsay. No, I say it most of the beginning of the planning committees, just so that people can get information prior to the meeting, but can also ask at the meeting. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, that's application P201365, and pages 11 to 38, and Bernard will take us through the item. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you. The committee will recall that this application was previously considered at the Mark Planning Committee, where it was deferred in order to allow for further consideration of parking and transport arrangements. In response to points raised by members at the time in relation to consideration of the potential site options, the Head of Planning and Economic Development advised that this was a matter out with the remit of the Planning Committee. In terms of the application, permission is sought for the erection of a children's nursery and associated works on vacant land located to the west of Clyde Terrace, Bothwell. The site is located within a residential area and extends to just under 1,700 square metres. There are residential properties to the north and south of the site, with a park to the rear of the site and further open space on the opposite side of Clyde Terrace. The main elements of the proposal relate to the erection of a nursery, formation of on-street parking, and the relocation of an electricity substation, which is currently on the site. The proposed building would be of modern design and comprise single-storey and two-storey elements. Externally, it would be finished in a combination of facing brick, render and zinc cladding. Within the site, an external play area would be provided. The nursery itself would accommodate up to 113 children and employ up to 25 staff. The nursery would be open for business between 8 AM and 6 PM, and as part of the proposals, 32 on-street parking spaces would be provided, with 6 located to the front of the nursery and the other 26 spaces on the opposite side of Clyde Terrace. In terms of the development plan, the site is identified as part of the general urban area within the adopted local plan. A variety of additional policies are referred to in section 1 of the 3.1 of the report, and the general aim is to ensure that development is appropriately designed, located, serviced, and results in no adverse impacts on the surrounding area. With regard to consultation, the responses are summarised in section 4 of the report. There are no objections from consultees, and any matters raised can be addressed by condition. A total of 161 objections were noted in the original report, and this included representations from Councillor and Margaret Mitchell MSP. In addition, a further 4 objections were submitted following preparation of the March committee report, which did not raise any additional issues. At the same time, and prior to the March committee meeting, a letter was also received which commented on the planning report and the handling of the application. It was dealt with as a stage 2 complaint in terms of the council's complaints handling procedures. Since the March committee, the number of representations has increased, originally to 200, with 270 of those being objections to the proposal. These figures are what is reflected in the committee report. However, since the report was written, the number of objections has increased to 290 in total. The points of objection are summarised in section 5 of the report and have been updated accordingly. The main issues raised relate to traffic, parking, relocation of the substation, the impact on nearby open space, impact of the development on the amenity of the surrounding area, overdevelopment of the site, and the general impact on the natural and built environment. The committee will also recall that there was a hearing at the March committee when considering this application. A further hearing was requested, and following consideration of the request between the chair and the head of planning and economic development, it was refused. The application site consists of vacant land within a residential area. The principle of a nursery being located within a residential area is considered to be acceptable. However, it's necessary to ensure that any proposal is suitable for the location and that any technical issues can be satisfactorily addressed. The design and scale of the building is considered acceptable and it is not considered to be overbearing or result in overdevelopment of the site. As part of the proposal, careful consideration has been given to the traffic impact of the development and associated parking requirements. This has resulted in the original application being amended to provide additional on-street parking. The impact of the development has been reviewed by the Council's Road Service, specifically in terms of parking and traffic impacts, and they do not object to the proposal subject to the imposition of suitable conditions. The overall impact of the development in both the natural and built environment at this location is considered to be acceptable. Following consideration of the application at the March Planning Committee, the applicant submitted additional documents relating to the site selection process and transportation matters. These documents were shared with the committee members for information. The Council's Road Services remain satisfied with information that has been submitted and do not object to the proposal. Whilst information concerning the site selection process has been submitted, it should be considered as background information which is not material to the consideration or determination of this application. Overall, to be acceptable since it complies with the relevant policies contained in the adopted plan, and it will not have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the surrounding area. It is recommended that the application is approved subject to conditions. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Bernard. Any questions for Bernard?
Chair, Councillor Drybrough's got her hand raised.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Drybrough?
Yeah, actually, Chair, it was a point of order, but clearly we're past that stage, so he didn't bother bringing me in. I'm concerned that it wasn't, that they weren't allowed, the residents weren't allowed to speak. And I know, I've already asked, and I do know that within the rules yourself and Pauline can choose whether or not to hear people, but I think it's smacks of being extremely undemocratic and not very open and transparent at all. And I would have liked to have heard them, but obviously you've decided that that you speak for us all, and that you've decided that they can't speak. Moving on from that, then I would just like to say, just to ask Bernard, you've said that there's going to be 32 parking spaces. Are you creating these that are additional, or are you just formalising the parking area that's currently there?
I'll let Fraser come in to respond from roads, but before I do, in terms of the parking provision, at the moment, I don't know if you're familiar with Clyde Terrace, but it's got wide pavements on either side of the road, and there's no, other than a few driveways on the street, there's no formalised off-street parking. So what is proposed is that on the opposite side of Clyde Terrace, a lay-by in effect would be formed, which would contain 26 spaces, and to the front of the nursery, there would be 6 spaces formed there. Fraser, I don't know if you'd want to come in and just add some clarity to that.
Yeah, that's right, Bernard. The carriageway width would be reduced down to a minimum of 5.5 metres wide, and the lay-by parking would then be separate from the running carriageway width, so it's fully off the running carriageway, if that helps, Councillor.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really. What I'm actually trying to get at is they can currently park there, though. You're not actually creating a car parking space. Bernard said there'd be the creation of 32 parking places, but in actual fact, all you're doing is sectioning off places that people already park. Or am I wrong? That's what how it looks on the plan. That's how it looks.
Yeah, for cars to park, they need to bump up onto the footway at the moment, and I think that's the kind of general practice. What we're doing, or what education would be doing, is to widen out the carriageway and formalise the parking within that. The parking would be protected by build-outs, so if you like, the running carriageway would be maintained. It would be a lot more formalised than it is at the moment.
Okay, thanks. But really, you're not actually providing any additional parking for all of the extra vehicles that are going to be there for staff and for parents dropping off children.
Well, there's very little parking during the peak times at the moment, so the parking that's been created for nursery is new, essentially will cater for the nursery.
Right, well, I don't agree, but okay.
Thank you, Fraser. Graham, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just come off mute there. 2 what-if questions that obviously Bernard or maybe even Pauline can come in on. Obviously, we have a big decision to make today on this. My what-if question number 1 is, if this is refused today, what happens to the provision of a nursery in Bothwell?
Pauline, do you want to come in that one?
Chair.
Thanks, Chair. If I just come in. The issue is, Chair, that the other sites, and you've had your site selection as background information, if this isn't given the go-ahead today, the Education Authority still has a statutory duty to provide nurseries places for small children. What they'll have to do then is create those spaces within existing primary schools in Bothwell. That's Bothwell Primary and the denominational primary, the name of which I've forgotten, either within the school building, if there is space, or within a porta cabin in the school grounds. And obviously that will cause additional congestion at those schools. If there are still insufficient places, my understanding from the developer is they may have to create the spaces in Cambuslang or Hamilton, which will obviously mean the inconvenience of parents of nursery-aged children in Bothwell having to transport their children to either Hamilton or Cambuslang to go to nursery. And then obviously that will have an impact on the nursery schools in those areas. Thanks, Chair.
I have one supplementary, Chair. That was my My second what if question and my final what if question. What if we refuse this today? Obviously, the applicant is the Education Department, obviously, of South Lanarkshire Council, and this is a decision of the Planning Committee of South Lanarkshire Council. Could the applicant, namely South Lanarkshire Council, appeal against a decision of the Planning Committee of South Lanarkshire Council? It may sound ludicrous, but theoretically, is that possible? Again, if Pauline or Bernard wants to answer that question.
Chair, through you, if I can, yes, Councillor Scott, because it's a separate legal entity. You have the Education Authority appealing to the Planning Authority, because although we are one council, they have a separate legal status. However, as you've pointed out, that would be a highly unusual scenario, to say the least. Thank you.
I would use the word ludicrous, but thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Fiona, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think to say that if this isn't approved today, that it's all very well having a what if scenario, but I think that we shouldn't be pushed into accepting a planning application that we might feel is actually detrimental to the area. Now, Pauline's just said that if it moves to Bothwell Primary School or another school, that it's going to add to the congestion. So we're clearly knowing that there is going to be congestion, that there is going to be a lot of traffic. I don't accept what they've said previously, that there's no parking issues there. We've got the massive amount of money being spent in Wooddean Park, and we're trying to encourage people to go to the park. We've got access to the park from there. We've got people accessing their housing. There are going to be 113 children in a nursery that is going to definitely add, and people can say what they like, but unless we go down the route of not allowing any traffic in there at all, unless you're a resident or disabled, then, which they have done in Edinburgh, then we are going to have congestion. We are going to have loads and loads of cars dropping off and picking up in that street. And I don't think we should be bullied because we're saying, well, that's it. It's the last site. It's the only one available. Have we looked at industrial units? Have we looked at other ones? I don't accept that at all. Sorry, Chair.
Pauline, you want to come back in?
I think Councillor Scott might want to come in first. He still has his hand raised. Is that a legacy hand, Councillor Scott? You're mute, Councillor Scott.
It's a legacy hand, my apologies. I'm trying. I will remove my hand. I've asked my questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair. Then through you, just picking on some of the points, and I don't believe that members are being bullied. You have all the issues before you today. Obviously, members have to make up their own mind based on the issues before you, because as you know, councillors, no site is perfect for anything. Any development is going to involve some inconvenience to people in the neighbourhood, and that's why planning officers put conditions on to mitigate that inconvenience. The only way to avoid inconvenience in planning is never to build anything anywhere. Councillors, the site on Clyde Terrace, if you've been to see it, it's a previously developed brownfield site which used to house garages and lockups, albeit it has been vacant for some time. Chairman, if an applicant were to come forward with a planning application for a number of uses on that site, including flats, houses, a pub, a restaurant or a shop, subject to all the correct planning processes being followed, it would likely be recommended for approval, given that it is a previously developed site in an urban setting. All these uses, Chair, would be potentially more inconvenient for the neighbours than a nursery school providing education for small children, which will create more traffic in the morning and evening, admittedly, for a limited period, but none at all in the evenings or at weekends. Chairman, Clyde Terrace is a wide street with wide pavements and houses along one side of the street only. I went out on a site visit the other week. I think there is 32 dwellings on Clyde Terrace, 8 blocks of 4 in a block cottage flats. Some of them might be semis, in which case there'd be fewer than 32 dwellings. I think the houses are formerly local authority houses, although I suspect most will have been bought by now. There are a lot of objections, but a lot of the objections, if you look, come from streets further afield on whom the impact of this development is likely to be minimal. I did count the objections and I worked out that there were 18 from Clyde Terrace itself, but from 11 households, because a number of households have submitted multiple objections. Now, that might not be the exact number because some of the objectors only give their email address rather than their postal address. But the point I am making is that a lot of the objections come from people who cannot be directly impacted because they don't live on the street. Chair, economic development, as you know, is a material planning consideration, and nursery provision is really important for working parents, particularly at this time of economic recovery. And of course, the nursery will create jobs in its own right as well. Chair, if you look on social media, you will see that there are a number of local people who support this nursery. But members are very well aware that it's quite unusual for applications to get more letters of support than letters of objection. As you know, members, that balance is really important in planning. And the balance that you have today is to balance the inconvenience of this to the neighbours in a limited way twice a day, when our own roads people are happy with the additional parking, with the needs of 100 plus sets of parents who need a nursery place for their children. And balance that with the possible congestion around the existing primary schools if it's necessary to make space there to accommodate the children. And then the inconvenience and stress of the 100 sets of parents of very small children having to potentially transport their children to Hamilton or Cambuslang because there is no place for them locally. And then the inconvenience to the parents of the children in the other nurseries as well. Chairman, there really are no planning reasons to refuse this application. You know, I reiterate, there's no such thing as a perfect site. But it's my view as head of planning and the other planning officers and your technical roads consultants taking an independent view that, having assessed all the details and comments from the objectors and the technical consultees, that this is an appropriate site for a much needed nursery, which will not cause significant long-term harm to people who live near it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Jim Waterway, want to come in?
Yeah. Has it been considered about putting in any kind of traffic calming? Obviously, you know, there are traffic issues, there are safety issues, and it seems to me that, you know, traffic calming measures could be taken on that street that would, you know, it would minimise safety considerations. Has that been considered, and could this committee ask for a condition to be added to the application to put adequate traffic calming measures in place? And I mean, you know, speed bumps that people can't ignore, not some of the ones that we put in some areas where, you know, you can ride over them without any difficulty.
Yes, I believe there is. Fraser, do you want to come in that point?
Yes, that's right. There is a condition for traffic calming, and council workload. That's the sort of things that we'd be looking for on that site, particularly to assist the pedestrians going from the east side of the road to the west side of the road where the nursery is. So very much so.
Thank you, Fraser. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. It's two things. First of all, I've popped a message in the group chat for Stuart to alert him to the fact that Councillor Allison's computer has frozen up, and although he can hear and is still present, is unable to participate, and he did wish to speak. That's the first thing for Stuart. The second thing is, when this application came before the committee last time round, I actually drove out and had a look at the site. And when I arrived there, I thought I must have arrived at the wrong place, because when I looked at the patch of land that looked postage sized, I thought there was no way on earth I was in the right place, because there was no way that you could put a nursery for over 100 children there. That's the first thing. The second thing is that my understanding is that the projected numbers of children in the Bothwell area requiring a nursery place will rapidly outstrip this nursery's capacity. What's going to happen then? And I think it's quite imminent that this is going to happen. The third thing is, the time of day that I arrived was halfway through the day. It wasn't lunchtime, it was about 11 o'clock in the morning. And there were lots of vehicles parked that obviously belong to the residents. And I think that either residents are going to struggle to park, or the parents are going to struggle to park because of the demand. The list of concerns I have actually goes on and on and on. And I'm not going to labour the point, because a lot of the councillors present today have already made these points quite clear. I've got serious concerns over the, I'm going to be rude actually, I'm going to say over the common sense of the position of this nursery. And the level of local objections seriously concerns me. I acknowledge the fact that you very rarely get a huge amount of letters of support through the nature of the beast. But the level of feeling seriously concerns me. I also understand that a lot of the local residents are elderly and they're quite upset and distressed over this proposal. And I would seriously urge consideration of an alternative site. And I don't know if Stuart can address Councillor Allison's issues with the being frozen out. Thank you.
I'm back in.
Alec, did you want to come in?
Yeah, Chair, could I get clarification first? I was frozen out. I had to switch my computer off to get the computer to work again from when Fiona was speaking up until towards the end of what Pauline said. Am I still eligible to take part in this item?
Stuart, do you want to come in that point?
Yeah, Chair, certainly in terms of the situation, because it's a quasi-judicial committee, members should be within the meeting for the full duration of the item.
Thank you, Stuart. Monica, want to come in?
She frozen out as
Monica,
well.
I'm not sure if you're on mute or not.
Monica's hand was up. Do you want to come in, Monica?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, just in a problem with the headpiece, I think. It was just really to confirm what Stuart had said, that unfortunately, Councillor Allison, because of the nature of the decisions that are made at the Planning Committee, due to the fact that you've missed part of the discussion in terms of our procedure, you wouldn't be able to vote in this, I'm afraid.
But can I still ask questions and contribute and just not vote?
Well, as a member of the Planning Committee, yes, you would be able to comment, but you wouldn't be able to take part in the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. And I apologise then if I'm going to cover something that happened when I was away. Fraser, there is significant difference between your assessment of the traffic in that area and the information we've received from local residents, videos, etc., showing significant congestion. What I've said, Sir Collins coming in. Why is there such a difference? Do you believe that congestion shown in videos, etc., is acceptable and therefore falls in with your report? And secondly, there is, when Miller Homes development came through planning, a lot of concern in this same area was raised about the extra traffic that was being added to the roads at that time. Yet this doesn't seem to have been taken into account because you're not being able to go out at all and see what's happening because of COVID. Why has there been significant differences? And does the road get narrowed? I know the pavement gets narrowed to create parking spaces. Does the road get narrowed as well?
Fraser, do you want to come in there?
Chair, if it's Colin Park here, is it okay if I just take that one?
Yes, certainly, Colin.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Allison, thanks very much for that.
You're very faint, Colin. Can you speak up or come nearer the mic?
Yeah.
Please.
How's that? Is that any better?
Slightly.
Okay. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I think up until Friday there, I was kind of confident that Fraser's team had done a pretty robust assessment of this application. It's something I was been aware of for the last number of months. But I got sight of some emails that came in on Friday, I think, to yourself, Councillor Dorman, and you shared them with me yesterday. So I actually went out this morning, just on the back of those videos, because I was concerned about the level of congestion that was shown in those videos. However, to kind of pick up on Councillor Nealon's point earlier on, I actually went out this morning and I thought I was at the wrong site, because in Clyde Terrace there was absolutely no issues at all. There were about 14 probably residence cars parked along the kind of front of the kind of the 6 semi-detached properties. On the eastern side there was a couple of cars at the top end, but generally along the whole area of where there's going to be new dedicated formalised parking bays created, there was no vehicles parked at all. I spent about 45 minutes to an hour in the area, driving about, just understanding what was happening. In and around Bodle Primary was very busy, but to be honest with you all, it was probably one of the better schools. Schools are busy, parents will come and drop off, cause congestion, carers as well. That happens, but it actually worked very well at the school, but very busy. In and around the junctions, the kind of staggered junction at Blantyre Road and at Clyde Terrace, it was okay. There was no issues that really gave me of any concern at all. I understand from speaking to Fraser just shortly before committee as well, and Fraser, you can tell me if I've got this wrong. I think the video footage that was supplied to you fairly recently perhaps took place on a Saturday. We're experiencing, since COVID started, at all of our, for want of a better term, beauty spots or park facilities, significant increased congestion in and around them, where people are going to explore the area, take their kids out, take their dog for a walk, etc. But this morning, between 8:15 and 9:05, I thought I was at the wrong site. There were no issues on Clyde Terrace at all, and that's coming from me personally from my site visit. So in terms of the difference, Councillor Allison, that's what I would say is the difference in relation to, I think it's the time of the assessment. And as I said, from my observations, I don't have any concern that this nursery cannot be accommodated. In fact, I would actually go as far as saying I think the formalised, dedicated off-road bays, along with the traffic camera, will actually create a bit of an asset down there along Clyde Terrace, and will actually provide a bit of a facility for the Saturdays and the Sundays. In terms of the videos that you saw, it was a bit challenging. There was lots of kind of double parking, cars up in the footpath, maybe not parking safely and sensibly. However, having these dedicated bays will actually provide that facility off-peak, and you've got that kind of dual role. So it's important to assess an application during the kind of peak periods for that application, and I don't think the videos that have been sent through fully represent, in fact I know they don't fully represent what I observed this morning and what Fraser and his team, I know Fraser personally has also been out several times and done a pretty full assessment of the area. Last point, Councillor Allison, I think your question was, are we narrowing the carriageway? Yes, we are. That is part of the proposals. However, the detail is still to be kind of ironed out in terms of exactly the width of remaining footpaths, the width of the bays, and the width of the carriageway. But we're confident that the principle of what is being proposed today, and in turn not objected to by the road service, is acceptable. So, sorry, hopefully that answers your question. If there's anything else, maybe Fraser can cover some of the detail.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colin.
Supplementary comment, if you will, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks, Colin. That explains your how you got to where you did. Sorry, Fraser, I was not impinging on your abilities or anything. It was just trying to get a view on why they were different. And I think Colin has explained that. But if the road is narrowing, you are once again going to make these issues at certain times worse, are you not?
Chair, again, just to come in there. I think, Councillor Allison, that we will not narrow it to a level that's unacceptable. We'll narrow it to a level that we're comfortable with. Slowing down, narrowing residential streets. The only concern I had today, if I can be completely honest with the committee, was traffic levels were quite low. There weren't any parking problems, but it's a very wide road. It's a very wide, two very wide footpaths. The whole environment as you drive down there, for want of a better term, could actually encourage speeding vehicles. So narrowing the road down, putting in the dedicated bays, supplementing it with traffic calming as well. As I said before, I think it will actually address some of the existing concerns and the concerns that I did see today. But I would just stress those concerns were nothing to do with a nursery. Again, that was just what was happening in the area already. So I'm confident, Councillor Allison, that through the kind of further detailed work, if consent's granted today, we'll be able to deliver something that would probably address your concerns about a road being too narrow. It won't be too narrow. We'll make sure that it's at a width that can accommodate two-way traffic, and also recognising the other uses on that road in terms of residents parking.
Thank you, Colin. John Anderson, you want to come in? Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to ask Colin a question. Bearing in mind I've got 6 schools within my ward, and I know Colin's been out probably every one of them. Is there a lot of schools in South Lanarkshire where we don't have congestion problems or parking problems, or is this going to be unique to this one in Bodwell? Because I know in my 6 schools, it's certainly not unique at the 6 schools that I cover, because there's always parking and congestion problems, which only last for a short period of time in the morning and then in the afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And just Chair, just kind of in response to that, I would say that one, I haven't been around every school in South Lanarkshire. I have been around many of them, but sadly there are many of them with congestion problems, but they are very short-lived. This school in particular, Bodwell Primary, I was quite pleased to see some of the additional road safety measures we've brought in as part of the Spaces for People. Just in the last number of months, where we've brought in some additional signage and lining to encourage more appropriate speeds. So there's nothing unusual at this school. But whilst it was busy and whilst it was congested, the parents, the carers, those that were accessing the school, with the exception of a few, generally all behaved very, very well. They parked sensibly. Your children were crossing at the appropriate crossing points as well. Today was a nice sunny day. You're likely to maybe have more appropriate behaviour from parents. Maybe wet days or when weather's not as nice, you may get some additional traffic at the school. However, I'm confident there was nothing unusual at this particular school. But I also have to say that it was quite far away from Clyde Terrace, and I'm still not personally entirely sure of the direct link between that area and Clyde Terrace itself. Clyde Terrace itself had no issues on it at all, and I'm confident that the proposals that have been put in to accommodate the nursery will also provide that added benefit for Clyde Terrace and the wider kind of uses that are in that area. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. I actually live across the road from a primary school and a nursery, and there's no dedicated parking for parents. And there's slight issues, very, very slight issues, and people do get a wee bit annoyed, but it only lasts for a very, very short period of time. So I think that they'd be quite lucky to get dedicated parking in this area. Councillor Driver, you want to come back in?
Yeah, it was really just to ask Colin then a question. So it's obviously, you've said it's quite a quiet residential street, so we're now going to have 113 children and maybe 20 staff all trying to park or drop off in that street. So if there's 32 spaces there, 20 staff, we've got children being dropped off. But now, I'm happy that Isabel's got no congestion issues in her ward, and my ward entirely different. Mine is probably more like John Anderson's. I don't have one nursery without congestion issues, and I have staff abused on a daily basis because people can't get in and get parked. They've told me that themselves, and the nursery has added massive issues because 1140 hours. There's, they've ended up with. The teachers will tell me that parents will arrive 3/4 of an hour before in order to get a parking space. So that's the state of play. So what I'd like to ask Colin is there any way that you can actually do what they do in Edinburgh and make sure that nobody's allowed to use the road unless they live there, or you have a blue badge, or perhaps your staff, and that I know that's what they do in Edinburgh. It's inconvenient because people have to park elsewhere and walk, or they have to not take their car. But it stops congestion, and that obviously that's what we're looking for here. Can that not be a condition that's put in here if they're actually going to give planning permission?
Thanks, Chair. If I can just come in there. Just kind of picking up some of your points. We couldn't make it a condition because restricting the use of any road requires to go through a traffic regulation order. So you can't put something as a condition that may not be delivered through your right of objection. If I'm correct in this, and Fraser, tell me if I'm wrong here, in terms of the issues over teaching staff, nursery staff, they'll be in before 8 o'clock, so they'll be able to get parked in the area.
Not all full-time staff. They've already told us that. They've already said in an early meeting that not all staff will be full-time, so they won't all be in before 8. That's what they told us at the other meeting.
Okay, so my understanding is the majority of staff will be in before 8 o'clock. Perhaps Bernard or others can come in if we're wrong there. And the drop off is between 8 and 9:30. So there's an hour and a half period where it's not as if every parent and every child's going to turn up at the exact same point. So there's 32 spaces that we've talked about earlier on. 20 or so of them will be for staff, and the other 12 will be for pick up and drop off and turnover. So there is a nursery travel plan. I think it's been conditioned. So through that process, which has been very successful, school travel plans actually are successful. We can engage with, when we use them at schools, we're obviously engaging with the whole community, and you can make some real differences as a result of that. We've got a brand new nursery, hopefully, coming in here, if committee grants that, and that would be one that there's a right opportunity to establish those kind of travel patterns and practices from day one. We're not trying to retrofit a school that's maybe been experiencing travel problems for some time. We can perhaps sort this at the very, very start, and that obviously requires colleagues in education to really work with us as the road service to put those measures in and encourage appropriate behaviour from day one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Any other questions?
Chair, Councillor Ross has got his hand raised.
Yes, Councillor Ross, can you come?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. It was going back to a comment that Pauline made earlier on. I'm not sure if I picked her up right. Could she possibly repeat when she was talking about the objections, the actual quantity of objections that came from the area that was most affected by the nursery, as opposed to the number of objections that came from out with the immediate area, just for clarification in my own mind. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, John. Pauline?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Councillor Ross. I mean, if we're taking into account that the most impacted people are going to be the neighbours on the street, of which I believe there's 32 dwellings, that's 8 blocks of 4 in a block cottage flats. Now, I'm not sure if some of those houses are semis rather than 4 in a blocks, in which case it will be fewer than 32. I actually counted that there were 18 objections from Clyde Terrace. Now, there will be more than that because I was only counting the one who gave their postal address, not their email address. Obviously, it's their email address. I don't know that they live there, and a small number were emails only. But of the 18 I counted, 18 objections, but that was from 11 households out of, I think, around 32 on Clyde Terrace. So that's around a third of the people in the street. Now, obviously, there are a lot of objections from other streets in the vicinity, but if we're going on the basis that it will be the neighbours who are most impacted by this development, and I think the comments of my roads colleagues support that, then, you know, a lot of the comments are taken from people who obviously it will have some impact, but a much lesser impact than the people who actually live in the street. Hope that's helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Lynn, you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. I thought objections would be objections irrespective of where they came from.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Don't see any other hands. Fiona?
Chair, I just think with the level of objections here, I think it would be unfair to actually grant planning permission today. I think it's ridiculous. I know, you know, I have been told in the past from Pauline, it didn't matter. We had 800 people complained about the road in Lindsayfield at the time, and she said it didn't matter. You know, and I accept that. You know, I know that we can't just, you know, take on board everything that everybody's saying, but I think for going from a quiet residential area, we're putting in a nursery, we're going to have traffic. I just don't accept what you're saying. And Colin, with all the will in the world, I know you're saying that the traffic plans are successful. You really possibly, I don't know if you're allowed to come to parent council meetings, but it would be good for you to come along to them, because I attend them all in my ward. And that's not what they say, and it's not what the teachers say. So we have massive issues at parking at schools and nurseries, and people being asked to park further away and walk are not happy or don't do it, and there's massive congestion. I don't see how this is going to be any different to any other nursery. I just don't, and I think it's actually ridiculous if it's passed today.
Pauline, you want to win that point?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry, Chair. I have to take exception to some of Councillor Dryburgh's comments. I have never said, nor would I ever say, that objections don't matter. The point that I'm making, that in planning law, we take into account the impact on the amenity of neighbours, the people who are most directly impacted. So on that basis, members, it would be logical to say if you live on a street or adjacent to a development, you are going to be more impacted than somebody that lives 2, 3, 4 streets away or more. And that was the point I was making. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Fiona, your hand still up?
Sorry.
Did you want to come back in? Okay. Any other questions?
Chair, Councillor McLaughlin's got his hand raised.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor McLaughlin?
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to get back to Colin Park regarding the size of the street and the width of the street, the length of the street. It's my recollection that there's residents only on one side. So it's going to be quite a quiet street anyway, because there's only houses on one end of it. But I'd like to get a view. I've got my own view, but I'd like to hear it from Colin. Because of the width of the street, if there were vehicles parked on both sides of the road, typically you see this in just about every housing estate that you ever visit. There's lots of parked cars on both sides of the road, and this acts like a traffic calming measure, and I think you alluded to that earlier, because that does slow down the speed of the traffic. If there were cars parked on both sides of this road, given the width of it and the fact that there would be parking bays created in the very wide pavements, is this road still going to be relatively easy to pass through, even at the times when it's the busiest, when most people are parked here, whether they're picking up or dropping off? It's a kind of loaded question, because I think I know the answer to that, but I just want to hear it from Colin. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Colin?
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor McLaughlin as well. Thanks for that. In terms of, is it going to be an easy street to pass through? I think it'll be as easy as it is just now in relation to the kind of park cars that are there. So, if anything, if people were to choose to park out with the parking bays or inappropriately, you may require people to kind of give and take, for want of a better term, some traffic calming associated with the cars that are parked. But what I again observed today, and Fraser's confirmed this as well from his own visits, is the volume of traffic coming down that road as just now is not at a level where perhaps somebody having to kind of pause to give way to an oncoming vehicle wouldn't cause us a significant problem. So as I said earlier on as well, if the principle is established today and committee grants consent, there will be further detailed work and discussion with education colleagues and their kind of technical advisors in relation to the agreed width of road. I think we were talking at 5.5 at one point, but that was based upon 2.5 metre wide parking bays. There is scope to go down to, say, for example, 2 metre wide parking bays, and that would in turn give you 6 metre wide roads, which a residential road, a brand new, newly constructed residential road in a residential estate can be 6 metres wide. But within a residential estate, you've also got short sections which are maybe narrower than that, and you've got shuttle work and such like as well. So, as I said earlier on, confident that we'll be able to come up with we'll be able to refine the design and the principle that's been established today to have I actually think a safer route for people to use in this area. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Alec?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's more a statement, as I can't be part of the decision process. I don't think I have heard a single objection to the fact that it is a nursery. I think most people, everyone that I've heard from has said that they would be quite happy with a nursery. It is the fact about how we service that nursery around about, particularly the parking and the traffic. The traffic was deemed to be difficult before the Miller Homes project started, which is a building estate. The estate is being built further down in there. It can only get worse. And I'm really at a loss, because there would be a loss to the local parents for not having a nursery when they need it. But then again, two wrongs don't make a right. And I'm very concerned about the issues that we're creating in this area, because we see them in other parts of the council where we've put things in and it's developed, and it always comes back to us when issues are created through planning that we've accepted. I know the site is not a planning issue, and I accept that, but it's very, very difficult to accept the traffic congestion here, even if it is only for 2 or 3 hours a day. It's still difficult to accept, because it will get worse with the Miller Homes development.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Chair, Councillor Wartaw has got his hand raised.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Wartaw?
Just to reiterate my concern about the traffic calming, I know that when you read Condition 11, it talks about speed reduction measures, but we're all familiar with traffic calming, which is largely cosmetic and signage based, and other areas where, Councillor Anderson will know he's got some traffic calming up near his house where, you want to keep your suspension in place, you drop your speed. And I would like to think that roads, when it comes to Condition 11, are going to be looking for that kind of traffic calming, the kind that does reduce speed and not just a kind of cosmetic type of traffic calming, which depends on people following signage rather than physical damage to their vehicles.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Wartaw, I would agree and give you a commitment. We will certainly be looking for traffic calming that is effective and I think picking up on perhaps Councillor Allison's point there as well, the one thing I'm well aware of is after planning decisions are taken and developments proceeds, if we've got it wrong, it's me that's left to deal with it. So I'll ensure that we'll look to put the infrastructure in place, ensure the developer delivers the parking layouts that we require and traffic calming that will give us a solution to some of the problems that will inevitably occur here. We can't get away from the fact that, as I said earlier on today, Clyde Terrace is currently a kind of relatively quiet route from my own observations today. It will get busier. You can't introduce the nursery that we're talking about now without that happening, but I'm confident that we can put in the infrastructure that's required to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Chair, Councillor Donnelly's got her hand raised.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Donnelly?
I don't know who would answer this. It's the part about where is it? The traffic management plan and the nursery travel plan. Can anybody talk me through what is the travel plan for the nursery that has now been put into place?
Anyone get information? Colin?
Yeah, certainly. And Fraser, I think Fraser just texted me to say his Wi-Fi's dropped out, so bear with me here. Certainly, the nursery travel plan will be, again, should consent be granted today. That's something that, again, colleagues in education will work on. We'll get an understanding of where nursery teachers, staff are coming from. We'll understand where parents are coming from. We'll begin to understand, where the pick up and drop off times are going to be. And that through that plan is when we'll start to add on to the solutions. We've got the parking that's going to be provided, the physical lay-bys, we've got the traffic calming that will go in as well. But then we can also put in the kind of softer measures about planning, start times, stagger times. Don't have quite simply every child coming at the one time. Have that plan in place. So there is not, unless, apologies, Fraser may want to come in, or maybe Bernard, there's not a plan in place now, but there will be a plan developed. It'll be a live document. We don't want a plan that gets approved at planning consent and goes on a shelf. It's a plan that is actually dynamic and it's changing every year to respond to the demands at the nursery. And that's what we do. We do at schools to mixed effect. Councillor Driver, I appreciate your point earlier on. Not every school is entirely perfect, but being responsive. Looking at it, not putting it on a shelf, looking at it, updating it, reviewing it, having it been dynamic is what makes these plans effective. But that relies on the school community, the nursery community, the parents, the teachers, and sometimes the residents kind of working with everybody to make sure the plan is effective. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I come back?
Okay, Mary.
So, right, I accept the fact that if it get passed today, then that's the engagement that would take place. So none of that has taken place at the moment with the community for the nursery. It would be once it get passed today, we would start to engage with the nursery and the parents and the community at Clyde Avenue. Yeah. Would that be right then?
Chair, I don't know the detail of that, but Councillor Donnelly, thankfully Fraser's Wi-Fi's kicked back in and he's just offered to kind of come in that one there as well. So if I can just hand over to Fraser to give a wee bit more detail on that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. There's two things. There's the nursery travel plan, which is a document, as Colin explained, to try and manage the issues to try and prevent them from happening. One of the things that we'd be looking to glean out of that process was to encourage people to use the nearby cycle route to establish walking practices and these sort of things from an early point. But that's not happened yet. That would take place just as the nursery comes to start. The other aspect is the traffic management plan, and that was more about the construction element of the development, and that was to make sure that there was suitable staff parking while the nursery was being constructed, and that there was measures in place to make sure that the residents weren't impacted as much as they could be if there wasn't the plan in place. So it's two different things, but none of these have come to fruition yet because we're still at an early stage in that.
Chair, can I come back just quickly?
Okay, Mary.
It just seems to me that the points that the objectors are making and points that have been made here today, a lot of it would be covered under that travel plan, the nursery travel plan, if we were convinced that that discussion going forward would be a rolling discussion, which would be flexible and it would grow. Alive was your word, a live document that would then grow. And for me, that would answer a lot or alleviate a lot of the points against the plan today. So I'm just trying to be reassured and reassure the committee that that kind of discussion, we would enter into that with the neighbours and with the people that are going to use it, the families that are going to use the nursery, so as that we remove any of the problems that they may see in terms of congestion and plan and parking.
Okay, Mary. Pauline?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just wanted to come in and, yes, reassure Councillor Donnelly, we haven't started those, or the council hasn't started those discussions yet, because until members approve the application, there's not a nursery on the site to talk about. If members are minded to approve the application today, then the Education Authority want to start building as soon as possible to make good use of the good weather through the summer. But notwithstanding that, they don't envisage the new facility being able to open until the 22-23 school year, probably the early part of 2023. So that's just given Councillor Donnelly and the committee the reassurance that we've got between now and the start of 2023 to create a robust travel plan and have the discussions to which she's referring. Thanks, Chair.
That's fine.
Thank you, Pauline. There are no more questions? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
We agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4, and that's P200023. That's on pages 39 to 60, and Tina will take us through the item.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I thought my sound wasn't good. Is that okay?
Hear you now, Tina. Thank you.
Yep. This is a detailed planning application by the Walker Group Scotland Limited in association with the subsidiary Springfield Homes for the erection of 190 houses at Mansbury and Cambuslang. The application site it's currently open grassland on the edge of Cambuslang. It actually abuts the Drumsagard village area, so it's on the eastern side of that as you leave Cambuslang. The applicants proposed the erection of 190 houses, which would be a mixture of semi-detached and detached. And the layout is formed by two distinct areas of housing with landscaping in the middle. There's also quite unusually a well-established tree planted area that's being retained as part of the application site, but it's on the edge of the application. On the eastern boundary, and that won't be developed, and that will be left as woodland. But the site will be divided into two portions of housing, 135 houses to the north and 55 to the south. Development will be accessed via the main entrance from Hamilton Road, and the main open space and play area would be provided in the middle of the site between the two housing areas. In terms of the Planning Act, it is considered to be a major development because of the scale of it. And in that regard, there was pre-application consultation We also list in paragraph 2.3 a number of documents that were lodged in support of the application. In terms of local plan status, the site is identified for housing, is zoned for housing in the local development plan, and has been considered under the local development plan policies, which I'll come back to. In terms of consultations, the consultations are all set out in section 4 of the report, and most consultees have no objections subject to conditions. However, we do have an objection from Halfway Community Council, which is set out in paragraph 4.14 of the report. The Community Council object on a number of issues, including the principle really of development here, but also the detail in terms of the house numbers, health and safety, in terms of a main gas pipe that runs through the site. They're concerned about community facilities, and also disruption from construction traffic. And there's a number of detailed items listed there. Generally, in response, I would mention that in terms of the number, the pre-application discussion consultation was done regarding the principle of housing, but the detail came with the planning application and the 190 houses. We're satisfied that because it's such a large site and because so much of it is being retained as open space, that number is acceptable, and it's, as I say, really the layout in 2 pods, if you like. In terms of pollution, environmental services have not objected. The site itself is regarded as sustainable and easily accessible from public transport. In terms of community facilities, I'll come on to that as well in more detail, but the applicants are making significant financial contributions towards education facilities and off-site affordable housing and community facilities, education facilities and affordable housing off-site. Roads and Transportation have responded in terms of their consultation, have no objections subject to conditions, have no objections towards the principle of taking access from Hamilton Road. And under the Community Council, we have responded and said that roads are satisfied with the infrastructure and the improvements that would be made, particularly with a view to the new access, is considered acceptable. And also the Roads and Transportation Services flood risk management team are happy, as is SEPA. So really, in terms of the principle of development at this location, the site is identified in the adopted local plan, which we say in response to the Halfway Community Council's objection. Turning to representations, we have received a large body of objections. At the time of writing the report, we had 176 letters of objection, and the letters do include letters of objection from Margaret Ferrier, MP, Claire Hockey, MSP, James Kelly, previous MSP, and councillors Katie Loudon and Alistair Fulton. All of the points are set out in section 5 of the report, and again, I won't go through all of them, but I would highlight that the principle again has been raised here. I've said that the site has been identified in the current local development plan, but it's worth mentioning that it has been in the previous 2 local plans, back in 2009 and 2015. So effectively the site has been identified for housing since 2019 by the South Lanarkshire local plan. The area that I mentioned for the existing structural planting and woodland would largely remain on the eastern side. We do have to, the developer would have to, if approved, remove some hedgerows and trees on the western boundary, but there would be a scheme of replanting, and there would be some removal of hedgerows to the front of the site to actually take access. Also would mention the drainage and flooding issues which have been raised. As I've previously said, the flood risk management team are satisfied, subject to conditions, and so are SEPA in this case. Jumping to layout and amenity, in terms of the layout and amenity, we're satisfied that the site would meet the residential development guide. that goes down to the detail in terms of the distance between the new dwellings and the position and the orientation of the houses, to make sure that there's the correct privacy and not unacceptable overlooking. There is quite a difference in levels across the site, so the developer has had to take account of that. But we're satisfied again that in terms of the distance between houses and the arrangement of the houses and the orientation, all of that is acceptable. The final thing that I would mention, just to highlight in terms of the objectors, is really the strain on community facilities, which they're saying are struggling to cope. In terms of if consent is granted, we have negotiated with the developers significant, it's over 2 million in terms of contributions, 2.145 million, and that's divided up between education, housing and community. The education contribution is to local schools, Caskin, secondary schools, Caskin, Trinity, and also nursery provision, which is what education we're seeking. And community have requested £1,500 a unit, which would be spent in the local area. It's maybe worth mentioning that because of the community facilities are an issue that has been raised, we have had discussions with community, but if it's approved and if we take these contributions, they would be via a roof tax. So you get the money as the houses are paid on an annual basis, annually in arrears, which is normally the case in most sites now. So I'm just mentioning that in the sense that the money would come in over a number of years given the scale of the site. So community can't really be any more detailed at this stage, but it would be money spent in the local area. And finally, there's a significant contribution of 1.229 million been negotiated for off-site affordable housing. Housing services were asked whether they wanted on-site, off-site, or a combination, and have gone for off-site in this case. So all of that would come with the contributions. In terms of the community facilities, I know that what's been raised is more significant in terms of looking at community facilities, built community facilities, and built education, nursery, etc. However, as a site, it does provide a lot of open space. It does provide a park play area provision, so that there is quite a lot of contribution to all of that within the site. All of the other points are set out in section 5 of the report. So turning to our assessment and conclusion, the site is identified in the current LDP, and as I've said, has been identified since 2009. Part of the site would remain as structural planting within the green belt on the eastern side, which provides a really robust edge to the settlement boundary, so that that portion of the green belt would not be developed. Whilst residential development of the site is acceptable in principle, it obviously has to be acceptable to us in planning in terms of development management criteria and the design, siting and impact and amenity. And we're satisfied that all of that is okay in terms of is an attractive layout and does achieve amenity for the houses and indeed the existing houses, who are also separated by significant planting as well. Mansbury has been mentioned a few times in objections, and but Mansbury, there would be no vehicular access from Mansbury, but there would be a pedestrian connection there just to allow access into the other roads round about and pedestrian access. So in summary, we've got no objection to the application and recommend that planning consent be granted, subject to the conditions listed. Consent would be withheld, however, until the Section 75 legal agreement was signed to cover the items that I've mentioned in terms of education, off-site housing and the community facilities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions? Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Just getting the mute off again. First of all, thank you to Tina for the report. I was looking for she mentioned the 1.229 million for the off-site affordable housing. Am I right in saying that the sort of the global figure for community benefit is something like 2.5, 2.6 million? If Tina can confirm that, or Pauline. And it's a point around that I would like to make in terms of a lot of that is obviously will go to education. You've mentioned Trinity and Cathkin. But if you look at that area, Ward 14, Cambuslang East, because of the lack of a secondary school in situ in that ward, the money will go to Trinity, Cathkin. Children from that area go to Stonelaw, Uddingston Grammar and Calderfide as well. So some of that money that's getting raised in Ward 14 will go outside of Ward 14. But which leaves us with a 1.229 million, the off-site affordable housing. Will that go? I know it's off-site, but will that go to Ward 14? Will that go to that area, or will that money leave the ward as well? Or is there contingency for the affordable housing element of the community benefit, which is substantial? I full credit to all officers for negotiating that. But will the 1.229 off-site affordable housing benefits go to the local area? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Graham. Tina?
Yes, through you, Chair. The overall total, I just have to stress that the legal agreement hasn't been signed yet, but we have had in writing agreement from the applicants. But subject to it being signed, the total is 2.145 million. 2145370, which equates to over 11,000 a plot. Again, in terms of the spending from all the service departments, they do have a say where the need is, but because the money will come in over a number of years, they might not decide on the project until the money has been accumulated. My understanding from education is they're the catchment secondary schools, and the money that in terms of seeking contributions from the developer, it has to be for the schools in the catchment area that require spend. So it is Cathkin, Trinity and Nursery provision that they've specifically cited. In terms of the affordable housing, as I say, housing services chose to go with off-site provision. My understanding is that it would be in the housing market area, so I don't have any guarantee that it would be in the immediate ward, but we can come back to members on that. But normally, if housing take a contribution off-site, then they look to spend it in the housing market area, the local housing market area, but maybe there might not be availability or a choice in just limiting it to the ward.
Thank you, Tina. Bert, you've got a question? Councillor Thompson? Can't hear you, Bert.
Your microphone's back on mute again now, Councillor Thompson, but it was off mute. Yeah, it should be off mute now. Councillor Thompson, if you're wearing a headset, can you try unplugging it and putting it back in again?
Hello?
Yep.
Hello, can you hear us?
Got you, yep.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now. No, you've went silent again, Councillor Thompson. Can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Right, okay, thanks. Hopefully that'll be it. Yeah, I'd just like to say that the housing, welcome housing getting built, especially affordable housing, social housing, it means that people will be spending the area and we'll get community tax money as well, so it'll help the council. And generally, it's the infrastructure I'm worried about. I'd like to see the infrastructure as part of the plan is put in place and gets developed alongside it, like transport, shops, doctors, dentists, you name it. Development as the development goes along, not just as an afterthought as I see it. Payment, community payment, the money we're getting is welcome, very welcome, great negotiation, but as you say, it's paid in arrears and it takes a few years to filter through. Would it not be, or could it be possible for the council, because it's guaranteed money, to loan that money to get the infrastructure in place and develop things, especially, I think down there, the local member will be aware of it and has called for it for a number of years, about a new secondary school, etc. A lot of concerns still there, even though I welcome the development. But as I say, I think the money should be spent as soon as possible, even if it means borrowing it and giving it to the development and then getting it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Polly, you want to come in there?
I understand what Councillor Thompson's saying. I think he's saying that the council could borrow against future contributions coming in. That's not actually a decision that can be made by the planning committee. That would be one for our financial colleagues, but we can certainly mention that to them, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Mary?
If the kids are having to go to secondaries out with the area, would we be putting in buses and stuff?
Sorry, Mary, we couldn't hear you at the beginning. Could you start again? Sorry.
I'm just saying my points are very similar to Bert. I'm a bit worried about housing being put up and then the infrastructure not being there to back that up for the community. I think that would be a bit remiss of us to put housing in. It's like Castle Milk when that went up, or Easter House, where it was like concrete jungles. I wouldn't want to be seeing that happening, and then people isolated. So I think it's very, very important that we've got infrastructure round about in order to support the people that are going to be housed there.
Okay. Councillor Dryburgh?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, I saw that one of the comments was that the NHS were consulted with as part of the local plan, but I just wondered if there's any consultation with GPs, because clearly they're not, they're private, that they're contracted by the NHS. In my own ward, when I met with the GPs, they'd said that they actually couldn't cope with the number of new houses in the area and the number of new patients moving in. And that they hadn't been consulted at all. So I just wondered, is there any, any way that they can actually, is it just not done, or do we just not bother consulting with GPs in areas before we build lots of extra housing?
Pauline, do you want to come in there?
We do consult with the health authority through the local plan process. We don't tend to consult with them on individual planning applications. Just bear in mind that GP surgeries are actually private businesses. They are a supply and demand facility if they come in. And I'd also point out, this particular developer is paying in excess of 2 million in terms of infrastructure contributions to ask for health contributions on top of that. But my experience is, and we have an instance in East Kilbride at the present time where we're looking at a site for a doctor's surgery because they see the need and they want to create one. But we don't tend to on individual sites for that reason, because we wouldn't be in a position to take contributions. It would basically make the site inviable and then it couldn't go ahead. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back in there? I didn't ask about contributions, I just asked about consultation. I know the NHS, GPs are private contractors, but what I'm saying is, in my own ward, there's been massive issues with people not being able to get appointments, and supply and demand is all very well, but they haven't even got the space to have any more GPs in that surgery, but they've had a massive influx of new residents, obviously from the community growth area. So what I'm asking is there any possibility of any consultation, regardless of the fact that the local plan? Is there any way of sort of drilling that down a bit further, because to meet the local needs?
Pauline?
I'm not really 100% sure what's meant by consultation. We can certainly consult, and we do have at a very high level regular meetings with the health authority on specific sites and property. I meet them with my colleagues from property services. However, consultation is one thing and inviting comments, but we're still, as members know from our training on community infrastructure, there is only a limited pot of money, and the ask on the developer and the development is so great that I don't actually know how meaningful that would be if we couldn't actually extricate money. And my experience is that if a doctor sees the need, they do create a business and go into the site. But whether it's something we could mandate, I don't believe so, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. David?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on Councillor Dryburgh's point and go back to Pauline. Pauline, I do think that perhaps we should be making representations to the Scottish Government to bring in some type of methodology, because Councillor Dryburgh is absolutely right. There are health issues right across the authority that the NHS may or may not comment on at a local plan stage, but when it actually comes down to developments on the ground, it puts intense pressure on the local health provision, and also sewage and water and all the other provisions. And I know that we are very limited in what contributions we can ask for, but the developer is taking the profit out of that area, and then the public pound is left with the building up the infrastructure to actually support those properties that the developer has taken a profit on. So I do think there's a greater need to widen the scope of consultation, absolutely, and potential contributions to deal with a wider infrastructure problem that we're all going to face at some point across the ward. It may be different in each ward, but we will have infrastructure problems. And it just seems the current setup is not suitable to address these problems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Tony, you want to come in?
Yeah, if I can, Chair. Yeah, just to answer Councillor Shearer's and Councillor Dryburgh's point there. At the moment, there's no statutory requirement when we prepare our local development plan to consult the health boards, albeit we do informally. But because there's not a remit, the response we get is sometimes very limited. But the new Planning Act is going to introduce a new style of local development plan. We have to prepare what's called an evidence report right at the outset. And the list of things that the evidence report has to consider is both the health needs of the area, but also what is the impact of new development proposals on healthcare. So come the next LDP, in quite a short time into the process, we will be seeking formal comment in consultation with the health boards at that particular point, if that helps answer that question for those two.
Thank you, Tony. I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agree with the report?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, and that's P201492, and that's on pages 61 to 72. And Tina will take us through the item. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't too far away. It's in part of the Newton Community Growth Area, Newton Farm Development, for the erection. It's another pod of housing for 75 houses, Taylor Wimpey, West Scotland, and it's really discharge of conditions and the approval of matters specified in condition, the detail for the housing. The site itself extends to approximately 2 hectares and is part of phase 2 of Newton. and is bounded to the north, northeast and east by other parts of phase 2 of the community growth area. The 75 houses are set out in an attractive layout, and the development would incorporate principles of SUDS and drainage to the north of the site, close to the River Clyde, within the proposed Riverside Park. Paragraph 2.1 lists the usual documents that we've also received as part of the planning application. In terms of planning history, the principle was granted back in 2014 through the granting of the master plan and the principle of the community growth area here. And we've approved other matters specified in condition applications detailed for the pods that are round about. In terms of consultees, we've got no objections from any of the consultees, subject to some conditions. And we haven't received any letters of representation either. The new community growth area is based around a new distributor road, as members are probably aware, and forms a loop. And this site would be constructed at the end of pod 2E. The application is for 75 houses, as we say, and there's a mix of 4 different house types, consisting of 3-bed detached and 2 and 3-bed semi-detached, and there's also some terraced. It all meets the residential development guide in terms of amenity and layout. Therefore, recommending approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions for Tina? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, and that's item P200731, and that's on pages 73 to 84. And Tony will take us through the item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the report relates to 2 temporary storage containers that have been sited to the side of an existing convenience store at 117 Cedar Drive in East Kilbride. The site's located within the Green Hills area, and the surrounding area is predominantly residential in nature. The closest housing is located immediately to the west of the site, and these are single-storey terrace properties that have back gardens that back onto the application site. So the application seeking retrospective planning consent for the retention of the storage containers. The applicant indicated at the time the application was made that the storage units were required as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was to allow for the storage of additional inventory during those very early days of lockdown. Since then, the applicant has submitted a separate application for a permanent extension to the shop, and that was granted permission on 19th of May this year. Also, a separate application, a retrospective application, was lodged at the time of this one for a snack van at the front of the shop, within the shop's parking area. Now, this application was refused under delegated powers on the 5th of March this year, mainly due to the impact on the residential amenity of the area, noise and smell, etc. The use is now stopped, but the container remains on site, and we are pursuing its removal under enforcement powers separately. So consultation responses are set out in section 4 of the report. No objections were received from roads or from environmental services. Licensing were consulted in relation to allegations made at the time that alcohol was being sold from the containers. The licensing investigated that, and that activity has now ceased. The shop itself has a valid alcohol license, and the sale of takeaway alcohol from the shop is allowed under that license. License have also said that the storage of alcohol in the containers itself does not require a license. In terms of representations, 18 letters of objection were received following the carrying out of neighbour notification and publicity, and these are summarised in section 5 of the report. They largely relate to issues about parking and servicing and traffic. But as I've noted elsewhere, and when I said previously, roads have no objections to the proposals. A number of other matters raised relate to either how the shop itself operates or was operating during the first stages of lockdown, or they seem to be linked to the separate application for the hot food snack van that was operating at the outset of lockdown. I think, to be fair, the snack van was causing immediate issues for the local area, and that was one of the reasons why we refused that application. However, those issues that I mentioned there, they're not material to the consideration of this application. So in terms of the assessment, the containers, as I said, are associated with the convenience store It's long established in the area, and they were required for the storage for a temporary period while the applicant progressed proposals to extend the shop to create additional storage area. The containers are within the curtilage of the shop, and so therefore the principal development is acceptable in land use terms, albeit only on the basis it's for a temporary period. In terms of the visual impact of the containers, they are located in close proximity to the rear gardens of the terraced housing adjacent to the site. So there will be a small element of impact on amenity for the area. However, they are houses that are already located adjacent to the existing service yard, so there's already an element of activity. In addition, the houses are single storey in height and they're separated from the service yard by a 2 metre high screen fence, so pretty much well screened from between the two sites. So therefore, we consider the impact on the amenity of these properties is acceptable. In terms of the visual impact on the wider area, one of the containers is within the service yard and is screened by existing boundary treatment for the yard, so there's no issue there. The second one is sited on the next to an access to the service area. It's not screened from the wider area and it can be viewed from the public road. However, it is grey in appearance. It's fairly small scale. It's less than 3 metres in height, and as we've said, it's temporary in nature. So we are satisfied that there is an impact on visual amenity, but it's limited and it will only be for a temporary period. So in conclusion, then, we're considering that the retrospective proposal is acceptable given its purpose and temporary nature. The shop does provide a good local service to the local community. We're therefore recommending that permission be granted, albeit for a temporary period of 1 year.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions for Tony? Archie?
Councillor Buchanan, your microphone's on mute.
Get this right yet. As it's mentioned in the report, the hot food container is mentioned, so I think I'm entitled to ask a question. Why are you having to take enforcement action against them? Why is it not just removed it? Because we've had a lot of problems with this applicant. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, once we refused the retrospective application for the snack van, we obviously advised the applicant that had happened, and we sought his cooperation in removing the snack van. But he hasn't done that yet. It's still sitting in the front of the shop. So we are probably going to have to pursue enforcement powers in this case, unless we will approach him again before we do that and ask him to remove the container. But if he doesn't, we will take enforcement action to ensure that.
Okay, just another question. And if we grant these two other containers for another year, what's to stop them just doing the same again and ignoring you?
Yeah, so we were granting consent for a year on the basis that we think that's sufficient time for him to build the extension to the shop that he's got permission for. If he hasn't completed the extension of the shop in that time, then he does have the right, if you like, to make another application to extend the temporary period. But in assessing that application, we'd have to take into account what progress he has made in extending the shop. So if there's been no progress, then we might be not willing to grant a further extension. If he's close to completing, then that might be a different outcome. I think just because of where the extension to the shop would be built, if it is built, and we hope it is, the containers would have to be removed anyway, because that's on the side of the extension to the shop. Yeah. So,
because I think you all agree that the 3 containers sitting there, it's absolutely shocking and untidy. Thank you.
Okay, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. So we're having to enforce them to remove the snack van, which has been sitting there, and it is an absolute eyesore. And we're hoping then that they'll remove these after a year if they no longer need them. How do we know that they're not selling alcohol out of? How do we know that that's stopped? Because I've seen it, so it's in my ward. They were selling alcohol, like people were paying for getting their cup and going there to pour their own beer and out of the kegs in the actual storage container. And now all of a sudden it's now being used to store goods for the shop or store alcohol, whatever. So how do you know that that's ceased?
Well, certainly we were aware probably about May, June last year that alcohol was being served from the containers, and licensing investigated that, and that was resolved. And now we haven't been advised that that's reoccurred again. But what I will do after this committee, we'll contact licensing just to get them to investigate that again. As a planning authority, we don't have any control over that per se. Albeit there is a condition that says only storage can take place from the container, but if it's alcohol being sold, then licensing have a much stronger remit than we do. But I will contact licensing after this and ask them to reinvestigate if that's the case.
Okay, Fiona. Okay, John Anderson.
Yeah, I would just like to ask, the retrospective 1 year, is that from today? Or is it from when the containers were put on site? Bearing in mind that the idea or the reason for it was additional storage because of COVID. I think that's a bit there, sort of red herring now. The COVID is more or less, you don't have a problem. There's certainly no shortage in the shops or anything. So is it from today, or is it from when they actually put in the containers on site?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Anderson, it would be a year from today if consent is granted, yes.
Thank you, Tony. Alec?
Thanks, Chair. Just want to check with Tony how long the process is liable to take if he is going through the enforcement process, and if that is not successful, what action will the council take to be able to rectify this situation?
Yeah. Okay, through you, Chair. So we would serve an enforcement notice, and we would normally give, I'm just guessing here, I'm just plucking a figure out there, say 28 days to remove the container. It's only when the landowner fails to comply with the notice that he's actually breaking the law. So for us to pursue that further, we have to then report the matter to the Procurator Fiscal to see if they want to pursue the matter through the Sheriff Court. But we often find that when enforcement notice is served, then that is the catalyst for action being taken by the landowner.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Agree report.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 7, that's P210511, and that's pages 85 to 94, and Tina will take us through the item. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say at the outset, this was a planning application that we could have dealt with under delegated powers, but the local member, Councillor Brogan, had asked for it to come to committee. We only have 1 letter of objection and 2 letters of support. But just to mention that, it's a detailed application for an extension to the existing primary school at Newton Farm, Harvester Avenue in Cambuslang. The proposal is the erection of an extension on the northeastern gable of the site, which is in 2 stories, and it would provide 7 additional classrooms, 1 additional needs AN room with associated stairwell, toilets, and a new head teacher's room. The extension is, as I say, 2-storey with 3 classes and the AN room on the ground floor and the 3 classrooms on the upper floor. The extension will be the same height as the existing building and will extend the building by approximately 20 metres into the area of the playground while maintaining the existing depth of 13 square metres. The extension will be finished in facing brick to match the existing building. Halfway Community Council did raise concerns about the lack of outdoor space that would be left available for the children there with the additional classroom being built. However, following the construction of the extension, there would still be a sizeable playground area would be maintained. It measures approximately 5,000 square metres but they're also in the fortunate position that they've got a football pitch there and a Muga pitch, the multi-use games area. So they've got both there, and Education have confirmed excuse me, that the classroom space would supply the necessary floor space required for the catchment area. In terms of representations, as I say, we had 2 letters of support and 1 letter of objection. And the objection is raised by someone in Bramble Wynd, because the extension does move closer to the houses on that street. However, there's still also playgrounds there. The extension moves in that direction, but we're still satisfied that there's significant distance in excess of 40 metres to the closest property, and also in excess of 60 metres to the properties to the east. So we're quite happy that the distances, and they're all contained within the playground, within the parameters of the existing school. The 2 letters of support are really just saying that they're in favour of an extension. The demand for places has greatly exceeded those available very quickly, and they're saying that it's a good thing that can be accommodated. Education Resources had advised us that there always was an extension to extend the primary school, and it was envisaged that it would be on this side of the school. Therefore, in conclusion, the extension will be set back from the existing housing adjacent to the school, and does not result in any overshadowing or overlooking to any unacceptable degree. A substantial area of playground would still remain, and as I say, there would still be the pit and the Muga pit that would remain as well. So therefore recommending approval, subject to the conditions attached.
Thank you, Gina. Graham, you've got a question?
Thank you, Chair. You're quite correct. This has been brought to committee by my colleague, Councillor Brogan, in relation to a matter that he wanted to raise at committee in relation to the application site. I believe that with the Muga pitch, there is current problems in relation to antisocial behaviour, with the floodlights operating and antisocial behaviour spilling over into the local houses. And obviously, Councillor Brogan is concerned that this extension may exacerbate that in terms of the antisocial aspect of it. So that's one point. The other point is, with the adding of this, I'm led to believe, and again, Tina can confirm or deny, that I've seen projections for this Newton Farm Primary School for not a million mile in terms of years ahead, that there would be an enrolment, a school enrolment of between 800 and 850 pupils. That is bigger than some secondary schools we have. Namely, I think off the top of my head, bigger and the Lesmahago. So, I mean, has that been taken into account, that there can't be endless extension? Maybe there could be endless extensions, I don't know. But if there is endless extension to this, is this going to be the last extension, or will there be more to come? And basically, that's it. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Through yourself, Chair. Just taking Councillor Scott's first point about the antisocial behaviour. It is something that happens, or allegations made about a number of the Muga pitches. But my understanding is that that's under the control of Education, and they can close them if the problem is so bad. But clearly, if there is a need, and out with school hours, that they try the best they can to keep them open. But it's not really a planning matter. In terms of additional children during the day, I don't think that would impact on antisocial behaviour, because I think it's in evenings out with school times, and people locally using the Muga. The second part of the second question you had, Councillor Scott, in terms of further extensions, I did see the report. It's not really for planning, because we're being asked to consider the extension that's put before us, and that's what we're putting before members today. But I was aware that there was a report to Executive Committee in terms of the principle of just to advise members about the spends for the extension if it was approved, and they're aiming for completion August 22. And you're correct to say that the projections were over 800 over the next by 5 years time or so. But again, it's not a matter for planning. This extension is for 7 classrooms, and probably in answer to your final point, never say never. We would have to consider any application brought forward. However, having had discussions with education, I'm not aware of any plans to bring anything else forward for this site. But if it happens, we would have to just consider it on its own merits, as we say.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Maureen?
Thanks, Chair. It's actually more to do with the floodlights again. Can we not put a condition on it about the times of the floodlights that they are operating, Tina?
Yeah, normally it's controlled by education rather than planning, because they're better equipped. Because if they don't want people using, if they decide to close them earlier, then they can close off the floodlights. So we normally leave it as a matter for education.
No, but it can be done, because it was done in my area that the floodlights couldn't be put on after a certain time. And if that helps to reduce any of the conflict between the residents and the school, surely that's something that we could address. Thanks.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm saying would be impossible. It's just in terms of attaching a condition. If members wanted a condition on, it could be added. It's just normal practice is that education can operate it, and if they choose to vary that, if the antisocial behaviour is particularly an issue in an area, then they can close it. They can close it and close the lights off earlier, so they can be flexible.
Thank you, Tina. Alex?
Thanks, Chair. Just question regarding the car park. With extra staff, etc., has any consideration been taken to any extra usage that will be needed, or was that all taken into account in the original application when they deemed that they would be needing to expand in the future?
I think the latter. Fraser was involved in looking at additional spaces, or whether additional spaces were required. But my understanding is that the existing spaces can cope with what's there. They are looking at education, are looking at improving the drop-off area if required, but they didn't require additional spaces.
Graham, you want to come back in?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Just a supplementary on what Councillor Devlin has said. Could we, I accept that the Mugger pitch is under the control of the Education Department. Could we make representations today from about the time scale? Because I'm led to believe from Councillor Brogan that the floodlights can be operating at 10 o'clock at night, which I think is quite frankly overkill, to be perfectly honest. I mean, so what can we do to get a sensible timing for the floodlights at that facility? Which is why obviously we're at this committee today, because it was such a concern for residents that they went to Councillor Brogan, who quite rightly exercised his right to bring this today, because it is a problem. I accept it's between education and SWLC, but there appears to be the idea of floodlights at 10 o'clock at night in a leisure facility, and that means they're still playing football maybe on the road up to 10 o'clock. I think we've got to make some representation or even a condition from it. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, I mean, if members were happy, we can certainly take it up through education and have that discussion. We only had the one letter of objection, and I think the gentleman from Bramble Wynd had raised it, and we had spoken to education about it. But I can take these discussions further and report back from Planning Committee if you're happy with that.
That would be excellent. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Okay. Well, agenda item 8. Richard's going to be leaving us for this one, and I think it'd be a good point to take a comfort break.
Yeah,
So,
well,
is that okay?
I'll off. Well, someone will ring me at the end of it, presuming Stuart will.
Yeah, I'll call you in, Councillor Lockhart, when item 8's completed.
Thank you.
So, if we come back for about 12:10, would that be okay with everyone? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 8, and that's P210074, and that's on pages 95 to 104. And Tony will take us through that item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report relates to the retrospective application for the installation of a sign, illuminated advertising panel on the fascia of a convenience store at 30 Westport in Lanark. You remember that the application was reported to the Mayor Committee with a recommendation to grant consent subject to conditions. However, a decision was deferred to allow for further information to be provided to members regarding the control of brightness levels of the sign. So the report before you today, it's been updated in several places, which reflects the discussion that took place last month, and also discussion with the signage company and also officers in environmental services. So in terms of its position relative to nearby houses, the sign faces into the petrol station forecourt and also southwest along the A73. It doesn't face directly towards any residential properties on the other side of the A73. And there are also existing trees in the front garden of these properties, which adds an element of screening from the surrounding area. In section 4 of the report, I've referenced that the brightness levels that are in the proposed condition 1, they're sourced from the Institute of Lighting Professionals, their professional lighting guide. And the limits that are being suggested by environmental services are typical for a relatively suburban environment such as the one that we have at the application site. The candelas per square metre levels, they're an SI unit of luminance, so pretty well established means of measuring brightness levels. Environmental services have advised that they've received concerns about the level of luminance at nearby properties in late last year, and they inspected, they investigated, the nighttime team investigated that, and they determined at that point that the level of light from the display wasn't causing a statutory nuisance, so no further action was taken as a result of that. We've spoken as well to the applicants. They've since installed a light sensor to the panel since that complaint I referred to previously, which controls the brightness of the sign according to the ambient light conditions, the background light conditions, and to ensure the brightness doesn't exceed the values being suggested by environmental services. We'd also say that the luminance levels are set and controlled remotely by the signage provider, so the applicant can't adjust the luminance himself without coding being provided by them. So they've told us that they operate this approach throughout the country. They're a national signage company, and that's to ensure that their clients can't adjust the brightness of their own displays, which may contradict and breach planning conditions. They've also confirmed that between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. during the summer, the display will only show the time on a black background. And that during the winter months, this will be amended to between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. And they've also said that between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and 10 p.m, the display will be dimmed to 200 candelas per metre squared, which is less than the threshold being suggested by environmental services. I think I said last time that we're proposing 3 conditions, and that would involve a 3-stage approach if complaints are received about lighting levels. So first of all, we set maximum brightness thresholds. If complaints are received, then an independent evaluation has to be carried out by the applicant. And if the complaints are received, and if there's a breach of the condition, the mitigation has to be agreed with the council before it can be switched back on again. And finally, the sign must be switched off between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. where that matter has been investigated, and if necessary, the mitigation provided. So in conclusion, we believe that provided the conditions that we've set out in the paper part are adhered to, the panel won't have any significant adverse impact on the amenity of nearby residents. The luminance will also only be bright as is necessary to be visible and legible over the background lighting conditions. So therefore, we're recommending again the granting of advertisement consent subject to 3 conditions in the paper part.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions for Tony? I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll wait for Stuart to invite Richard back in.
I think he's back in. Councillor Lockhart, can you just confirm, please, you're back in the meeting?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, P210037, and that's from pages 105 to 120. And Tina will take us through the item. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. This is first one of 2 applications at the community growth area in East Kilbride. I'll take them separately. The first one is from Taylor Wimpey, West Scotland, and it's a significant site of 227 houses. And again, it's matters specified in condition. It's a lot of the detail that comes from the house builders. It is part of the East Kilbride community growth area, so the principle of housing has already been established. This particular site lies north of Newhouse Farm and to the north-east of Jackton Road, off Eaglesham Road, and north of Jackton Road on the southern edge of East Kilbride itself. The application seeks to discharge various conditions, and the details of conditions that were imposed on the original application for the master plan, EK 090218. It is 227 dwelling houses, and it is a mix of housing, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, and there are a mixture of detached, semi-detached and terrace. The proposal also includes landscaping along the Spine Road in the southeastern side adjacent to Newhouse Farm, and the southwest along Jackton Road. In terms of consultations, we've got no objections from most of the consultees, but we do have an objection from the Community Council. Jackson Thornton Hall Community Council have objected on a number of detailed issues, which are set out in paragraph 4.9 of the report. And they raise issues about capacity, the perimeter planted belts in particular. In terms of capacity, the site is higher than identified in the approved master plan. However, the layout is judged against the residential development guide, and the layout, just to see that the density can be is acceptable with enough open space within the site. And it does have the master plan planned park areas and large areas of open space. So we're happy with the density itself, and it allows for a mixture of house types. There's also a comment about the perimeter planting belts being too narrow, which Community Council are concerned about. But we've looked at that in detail, and they are consistent with the master plan. And the proposed planting buffer along Jackton Road is considered to be acceptable, and they've got a mix of plant types that has been deemed acceptable as well. In terms of representations, we did receive 6 letters of objection and 3 letters of comment, and the points are set out in section 5 of the report. Again, similar issues raised in terms of capacity. Also, one of the other main issues raised is about parking layout and design. In terms of the on-street parking and the layout, both ourselves and Road Services are happy. Roads have not raised any objections, and the proposals do comply with the current parking provision standards. But in terms of the residential development guide, we're also happy that it's a good layout. The other points that are raised are answered and set out in section 5 of the report. So therefore, turning to the assessment of conclusion, the principle has been established. It's part of the master plan that's already been approved, but we have to make sure that the details are acceptable. We have to make sure the capacity is acceptable, which we do think they are. And the layout incorporates some open space, although a lot of the open space is out with the housing pods by the way of the parkland. and we've got no objections from Consultations, so we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions for Tina? Fiona?
Thank you, Tina. It was usually just to confirm a couple of things. Now, roads have been really good to go up and fix all the problems that we had with the road that's been, the spine road that's been built with all the muck and everything that was strewn all over Lindsayfield. But what they told me at the time was in the conditions when they put in the fuel washing facilities that they're actually not feasible in all. So that was in the previous application. They weren't in place because they said not only would they cost tens of thousands to put in place, it actually wasn't. It wasn't really the best place to have them in, in situ. So I know I can see it in this and the next application that there's fuel wash facilities are listed there, and I know that we don't enforce. I don't know, there's an echo. So I'm just wondering, are they actually going to happen, or is it just there because they're always put in as a condition?
I see through yourself, Chair. Yes, they're actually going to happen. I think it's just in terms of the interpretation, in terms of fuel washing, or what methodology they actually use. And we have been guided by roads on that. I think after the last committee, I had responded just to say that roads have been inspecting the roads on a regular basis. The planners are also out on a less regular basis, but if we're out, we do check. I think the preferred option was the brush motor, a road cleaner, to be there as part of it. The developers are happy to provide that either individually or between them as if they're working in the same area. So I think we prefer that the condition mentions the wheel washing, but if the brush motor and the road cleaner is preferable through discussions with roads, then that's what we would opt for.
Yeah, so can I just ask then again, are the wheel washing facilities going to be put in place? Because a brush motor is not the wheel washing facilities, so it's in the conditions. So are they actually going to put that in place? That's what I'm at. I just want to know if it's going to be in place.
Yes. I think it is. I think it's just that the developers have been asked to do the brush motor in some cases, and they've been doing that. But they should be doing the facilities. But there was somebody, Fraser might know better, but I think there was somebody on site, or more than one person, but there were people on site. They were using a high volume washer rather than the normal brushes, because sometimes that can just turn up what's already there. So they were using this power hoses as well. So I think it'll be a combination of all of that.
Yeah. Can I just have a supplementary, Chair, as well?
I was just going to bring Fraser in to answer that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just to, we've been speaking to the lead developer on the East Kilbride community growth area, and what's been agreed is that they will be providing essentially a pressure washer to clean the wheels before they leave the site, Councillor, and that's deemed to be the kind of most appropriate way to do it, because what they've found is that if they put in the ones that you might expect to see in a quarry or whatever, they actually can create more of an issue when it's dry, because they're constantly having to go through a wet area. So the pressure washers would be used to stop the mud getting on the road to start with. In addition to that, though, they will also be using the brush motors throughout the working day to make sure that any sort of dust that's built up is removed as much as possible. And we're certainly keeping an eye on that during inspections, as Tina's mentioned.
Thanks for that.
Thanks. Is that okay, Fiona?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so just the other question was, it says that the access is from the Spine Road. Obviously, it's going to be from the Spine Road, the new road. Is that going to be accessed from the Jackton side, or is it going to be accessed from the Lindsayfield side?
Through you, Chair, I'll maybe ask Fraser if he could come in there.
Yeah, of course, Tina. At the moment, the spine road doesn't connect up through there, so currently the access we've likely taken from the Jackton Road side. There will be a traffic management plan, and I think the developer would be keen to take it from Jackton Road end because it's closer and closer to the main links. And we can certainly discuss how that's managed in the future. But for now, certainly the construction traffic would be coming in from the Jackton route end.
And I know that's what obviously was going to happen just now because they're not joined up. But when I spoke to the guy from Roads, he actually said that the preferred route would be through Lindsayfield, depending on where they're actually coming from and where they're going to. And obviously that'll be the same once this road's there for the housing as well. People are going to be accessing it through Lindsayfield and coming out at that bottleneck at the Morrisons. So I just wondered, at the moment, obviously, I know what you're saying, but as this moves on and that road is complete, can there be a condition in that they cannot access it unless it's from Jackton side?
No, I mean once the road is open, people can go either direction. If I'm understanding you.
Yeah, but construction traffic, surely we can dictate.
Oh, construction traffic. Sorry, I thought you meant ultimately traffic. It's something we'd probably have to consider through the traffic management plan, as Fraser says, as a condition on asking that. But I don't know whether we would. Well, I think we'd have to consider that as part of the information lodged.
Right, it's just that I just don't think we can have any further construction traffic going out, through Lindsayfield. I think, we've had quite enough. So obviously, if they're going through the other end, it's easier. Housing wise, there's not the same housing going through the Jackton side, but going through the Lindsayfield side, it's a massive inconvenience.
Okay, Richard, do you want to come in?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair. It's a general point. Looking at the map, I mean, here it is. This is a big block, if you like, almost is separated from the remaining housing and so on and so forth. And Jackton, I don't know the area at all, looks pretty small. Does anyone take much account of what I would call the new direction this is all travelling in terms of access, what I think I call the 20-minute rule? You've got, people are trying to be put within 20 minutes of various things that they can do and shops and so on and so forth. Does this satisfy the 20-minute rule? It just seems to be in the middle of nowhere. And how do these people, they don't have a local shop, they don't have a local anything unless it already exists in Jackton. And I'm really asking the question of, is enough taken into account when these applications of this sort of size are taking place in the middle of nowhere?
Gina?
Yes, through yourself, Chair. Yes, I mean, the community growth areas have been identified for some time, going to be back to 2009, I think. So, it predates the recent thinking of the very recent thinking of the 20-minute rule. However, within the community growth area, there will be retail. We've identified on this side of the road 2 retail pods, but it's a wee bit like Newton and the issues we've had there, that you get an awful lot of houses before you get the new retail because it's market-led. It does look worse, I think, in terms of the plan because there is a shop at Garden Hall, which is closest, but there's also quite a lot of shops, a neighbourhood centre at Hare Myers and Greenhills, and supermarkets as well. Not all within easy walking distance, but certainly within easy driving distance. But we do plan, and as I say, there are facilities within plans within the community growth area itself, but they do have to be market led. So there has been interest already and through the main developer. So hopefully that'll come sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I'll move the report.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Agree the report?
Agreed.
Agenda item 10, that's P210310, and that is on pages 121 to 134. And Tina will take us through the item. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second one in the East Kilbride Community Growth Area. It's a bit smaller. It's 131 houses, and it's Miller Homes this time. Again, just by way of background, it's part of the Community Growth Area, so the principle's been established, and it's access of new junctions formed from the Spine Road, again, in terms of the master plan. We've got no objections from consultees as set out in section 4 of the report. And in terms of representation, there have been 3 letters of representation received in relation to this one, and they're set out in section 5 of the report. In terms of the main issues, it includes amenity for the new housing, and also there's a property called Newlandscroft, which will actually sits within, or it's not within the boundary of the community growth area planning application, but effectively it is within the overall site. So we have to look at the standoff distances from that. So we do have a detailed letter from the owners there, but we're satisfied that there's sufficient distance from the property to ensure, I mean, obviously things are changing radically for that property, but in terms of standoff distances, they are significant. And the proposed layout includes a strip of land between the existing house and the new properties that would be landscaped. There's also a 1.8 high timber fence that separates the development from the existing property as well. And there's other issues raised in terms of noise and disturbance. Unfortunately, there will be a level of disturbance and noise given the significant building that's going on round about, but it would be, as we've said before, within the working hours that are stipulated by environmental services. The other detailed issues are answered within section 5. There was also an issue about footpath links, and the footpath links have been improved and added to the layout. It is a mix of 3, 4 and 5 bedrooms, detached houses again, but there are terrace properties as well, and smaller properties available and more affordable. And we're therefore recommending approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions for Tina? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. Agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 11, that's P201667, and that's on pages 135 to 150. And Bernard will take us through the item. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Chair. Approval of matters specified in conditions is sought for the erection of a private residential development containing 120 dwelling houses, which would be a mixture of 3 and 4 bedroom properties. The properties would all have off-street parking with either 2 or 3 spaces, depending on the number of bedrooms. The layout incorporates 2 main areas of amenity open space within the eastern and western boundaries of the site, including a suds basin. An acoustic barrier comprising an earth bund and timber fence is proposed along the main section of the southern boundary of the site, facing onto Borland Drive and the adjacent industrial estate. Planning permission in principle was previously granted in 2019 for residential development with landscaping and associated works on this site. This permission was granted subject to the conclusion of a Section 75 obligation to ensure that appropriate financial contributions were made concerning education, housing and community facilities. In addition, detailed planning permission was granted for the erection of 48 dwelling houses within the northern area of the site on behalf of Clyde Valley Housing Association in 2018. The 48 dwelling houses approved and since constructed satisfied the requirement of the Section 75 obligation in relation to the provision of affordable housing. In terms of the local plan, the site is designated as a proposed housing site. The principle of a residential development at this location is an appropriate form of development, and this is reinforced by the previous planning approval, excuse me, the previous planning approval for residential development on this site. No objections have been raised from consultees subject to the use of appropriate conditions, and these comments are summarised in section 4 of the report. I would highlight the response from environmental services, who are satisfied with the noise attenuation proposals, and also advise that odour should not be an issue due to the proximity of nearby industrial units. 2 representations have been received with only 1 objection submitted. The matters raised are summarised in section 5 and relate to the impact on the nearby industrial unit, parking, access links and the design of the development. In general land use terms and policy terms, the principle of a residential development at this location is acceptable. The proposed development would make use of a brownfield site and contribute to the regeneration of the surrounding area. The previous approval for a residential development at this location is also a material consideration. The design, layout and scale of the development are considered to be acceptable, along with the impact on the surrounding area. A residential development would not alter unacceptably the character and amenity of the area, nor will it be impacted upon unacceptably by the nearby industrial units. The proposal represents an appropriate form of development at this location and is considered to be acceptable. The application complies with the relevant local plan policies, and it is recommended that the application is granted subject to conditions. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Bernard. Any questions for Bernard? I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 12, that's P210282. That's on pages 151 to 184, and Tony will take us through the item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an application that's been made to the Scottish Government, the Energy Consent Unit, under Section 36 of the Electricity Act. It's for the creation of a wind farm at a site known as Heathland, which is around 1.5 kilometres northeast of the village of Forth. The application site itself at the moment, it's commercial forestry known as Heathland Forest, and the site is identified as a plateau moorland landscape character type. The proposals before us today, they represent an amendment to a previous consent that was issued by the Scottish Government in 2018. At the time, that involved the erection of 17 turbines at a height of 132 metres. The current proposals involve the erection of 14 turbines, so a reduction in number, but the height of the turbines has been increased, with 11 of the turbines being proposed to be a maximum of 180 metres and 3 of them 150 metres tall. There would also, as part of the proposals, be on-site battery storage as well. The 4 of the proposed turbines are within the boundary of West Lothian, and West Lothian are considering their part of the application separately, and they all have a height of 180 metres. The 10 within the South Lancashire Council, 7 of them would have a maximum height of 180 metres, and the remaining 3 would have a maximum height of 150 metres. So, taking all that into account, in terms of the assessment and conclusions, the principle of a wind farm here has been established by the previous granting of consent by the Scottish Government. Section 6 of the report sets out a very comprehensive assessment of the proposals as amended against national, strategic and local plan policy. We're quite satisfied that there's no adverse additional impact compared to the previous scheme, particularly in terms of the impact on landscape character, the visual amenity of the area, on residential amenity in terms of noise and shadow flicker, no issues relating to road and transport or ecology. And therefore, Chair, the recommendation is to write back to the Scottish Government to advise that we don't object to the application, subject to the conditions established in the paper apart. And we also want to recommend to the Government that we would like to see a legal agreement concluded to cover the heads of terms listed on the front page of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions for Tony? I'll move the report.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Alec, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it was just a quick point, Tony. One of the main residential areas from there, other than Forth, is Carnwath. I'm not sure exactly the distance. I was wondering, could we recommend to make sure that Carnwath is within the area where they would get similar treatment to the ones round about the Clyde Wind Farm down near Abington get for being able to access funding?
Yep, we'll certainly take that up with our colleagues in economic development to make sure that's the case. Councillor Allison, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 13, that's P201788, and that's on pages 185 to 200, and another one for Tina. Thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Chair. Change of use of part of a public house that's existing to form a beauty salon, which comes under Class 2, a coffee shop, which comes under Class 3, and a hot food takeaway, which is sui generis in planning terms. The come on in is at Alloway Road in East Kilbride. The applicant's Kilbride property seeks to change the part of the public house. They want to retain the public house itself and then provide these 3 units. The minor external works would be required to facilitate the development, but no extension of the property itself. And as I say, the existing public house would remain in its current use. There are no objections from consultees. As we say in 4.2, environmental services have not raised any concerns, and they're happy with the proposal. Although initially there was a lot of discussion about the cafe and the hot food takeaway, and this hot food takeaway itself being too small. So they've actually combined that, or they have a connecting door, and they use the one flue system if approved. In terms of representations, contrary to what we said at the beginning, there's a lot more support for this application than there is objection. We have received, since writing the report, another 13 letters, which are all letters of support. 113 so we had in total, 12 letters of objection, and now it would be 113 letters of support. The points, the concerns that are laid out in section 5 of the report, there is a concern that introducing the hot food and further commercial uses at Alloway Road could cause antisocial problems, noise and pollution issues. However, it is already established there that there's a pub there, and they're not extending the property, albeit that they are introducing new businesses. But in terms of a positive impact, and in terms of, as we've been saying about other applications, it provides very local services for local residents. And there is an issue, there was an issue raised about hot foods, because there is one fairly local, so but again it would be up to market forces in terms of whether it would be viable or not. It's also raised about traffic and problems with roads and pollution in the area. However, roads and transportation services are happy and have advised that the existing parking layout is sufficient size to accommodate overall the additional uses. The other points are set out in section 5. As I say, there is a significant level of support, and just really saying it would be a positive development for the area, and would offer additional amenities locally while providing business opportunities for additional employment, which we would concur with. Therefore, in summary, the complementary uses providing local services for the local area, so recommending approval.
Thank you, Gina. Any questions for Gina? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 14, that's the Scottish Government consultation on proposals for regulations on local place plans. And that's on pages 201 to 212. And Tony will speak to that one. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair said, this is reports to advise members of the current Scottish Government consultation on proposals for the regulation of local place plans, and also to seek approval of the Council's response to the consultation, which is set out in the appendix to the report. So, just in terms of a bit of background, we've reported to committee several times over the last few years about the government's work on planning reform. And that led to the Planning Scotland Act 2019 receiving royal assent in that year. One of the main aims of the government's reform of the system was to improve community engagement in planning matters, and also to strengthen the links between spatial planning, which is what we do, and the community planning side that the council is also responsible for. So a couple of measures that are referred to in the Act is enhanced community engagement during the preparation of local development plans. And there's direct reference there to the need to engage with children and young people, and also a statutory requirement now for a local development plan to take account of the council's community plan, which is a new aspect. I suppose more fundamentally, the Act introduces the ability for communities to produce what are going to be called local place plans for their places, with scope for these plans or part of them to become part of the local development plan. And the aim of this is to significantly increase engagement in development planning by effectively empowering communities to play a proactive role in the future of their places by setting out proposals that they would like to see for the use and development of land and buildings in their area. I think the local place plans are also being badged as being able to support community aspirations in terms of responding to climate change and also tackling inequalities in their areas. And at the same time, also recognising that places can have a direct and significant impact on the health and well-being of communities as well. The Act itself provides some high-level detail on the preparation of a local place plan, and that's described in section 3.3 of the report. Just pick out a couple of things there. Local place plans can be prepared by what is described as a community body. Now, that can be either a community council that's already been established, or it can be a community-controlled body that's within a definition of the Community Empowerment Act. I'd also say the local place plan has to have regard to both National Planning Framework, which is the national planning policy, and also the local development plan that's in place at the time. Part of the legislation does require councils, when we start the process of preparing local development plans, to write or to invite communities to start preparing local place plans. And it's meant to run in tandem with, both processes are meant to run in tandem, but that doesn't stop somebody coming forward with a local place plan at any time during the LTP process. So the Scottish Government's published a consultation on proposals on the associated regulations in March this year to support the implementation of the provisions of the Act. And this includes provisions for the content, preparation, submission and registration of local place plans. And at the same time, a how-to guide to aid communities develop their plans is also being produced by consultants. However, that doesn't form part of the current consultation. There's a table in section 4.1 of the report which highlights how the government sees an LPP being developed, but that's not set in stone, but it's a guide to how to see the process going forward. So, as I said, the proposed response to the consultation is found in the appendix to the report. I think one of the main issues for us is the government's desire for a light touch approach to the process. And I think it's recognised that the requirements should be user-friendly and avoid unnecessary bureaucracy for local communities. But they will have a statutory basis when they're registered, and therefore it's considered the overall balance has to be reviewed and addressed. I think the matters to which an LPP should have regard beyond the National Planning Framework and Local Development Plan are very limited, and they only make reference to the neighbourhood plans that the council have produced where one is in place. So that would mean there'd be no reference to the council plan or the community plan or other plans and strategies that the council has developed, or indeed of its community planning partners. So the consultation paper also states that a range of community-led action plans have already been developed out with this local place plan legislation. And indeed, South Lanarkshire has around about 10 that have been developed. And that's in addition to the council's own neighbourhood plans that I mentioned. So in such cases, we think that where the bodies are responsible are different, it's important that they do collaborate to avoid conflict between them. One of the measures of success of the process is going to be how consultation is carried out. I know our community planning partners have been very successful in ensuring inclusiveness when they've prepared neighbourhood plans. And so there should be robust requirements, we think, to make sure that any plan that the community produces uses good practice. We've identified the national standards for community engagement, which we think should be used as a baseline for the consultation process. There should be a minimum proportion of a community that would be covered by the LPP to be involved in the creation and adoption of the plans. Endorsement of the plan is also crucial, and we think consideration should be given to carry out a vote locally to demonstrate a clear majority of the local population and stakeholders are in support of the proposals. So next steps then, the closing date for the submission is the 25th of June. So we're asking committee today to approve the Council's response in the appendix. The Scottish Government's current timescale anticipates that following the completion of this consultation exercise, regulations will be laid before the Scottish Parliament at the end of 2021, and thereafter the provisions of the Act will come into effect. So just as well, noting as well that in advance of all this, the planning service has been developing much closer working relationship with the Council's community participation team, and we're under the scrutiny of the Community Planning Partnership Board, and this work will continue. So just pass over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Johnny. Peter, you want to come in?
Yeah, just a comment, Chair. It's good to see the Scottish Government catching up with what we're already doing in South Lanarkshire. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Alec, you want to come in too?
Yeah, just comment as well, again, as I've done in the past, about how we identify what we consider to be a local community. I mean, in some areas it might be easier than others. For instance, in my ward, we've got, can't remember, is it something like a dozen different community councils? Is that going to be 12 different local plans on a community council basis? Because it's going to be very different what happens up in Lead Hills compared to Dolphinton, or bigger down to Abington. Should we not be putting something in there to have some thought as to how we identify what is a local community, and is the local residents going to have their opinion as to what constitutes a local community?
Yes, through you, Chair. I think that's probably one of the shortcomings of the consultation process and the paper that we're consulting on, in that the definition of a community is very much left vague, I think it's fair to say. And we also have concerns that there might be situations where two bodies within a community are in conflict with each other and they could overlap. So I think the response does reflect that. I'll review it before we send it off, and just to make sure that your thoughts and views are encapsulated in that. But yes, you're quite right, Councillor Allison. There is some concern about that.
Thanks, Tony. Peter, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to help Alec out of that dilemma. My personal opinion is that communities identify themselves and should never be forced into being something other than they think they are. So hugely important. I know with my own community, my nationally recognised award-winning community, the first job that they undertook when establishing the local plan was to identify what the community actually was. So it'd be wrong to force communities into thinking or making them something which they think they're not. So that's just a piece of advice, no more than that. But thanks very much, Chair.
Sorry, thank you, Peter. Graham?
Thank you, Chair. It's just on a couple of points. I'll go back to some of Peter's points in a minute, but it's Alec's points about the identification or self-identification of communities. I'm led to believe by reading the legislation and reading this report that the initial approach for a local place plan must come from a community organisation. Therefore, if it's a community council in South Lanarkshire, they have identified boundaries. The council has decided that is, say, Calderwood Community Council or Upper Clydesdale or whatever, that the council has decided a community council boundaries. If there's other boundaries or sub-boundaries, for want of a better term, that local areas want to identify as, then obviously they would have to create an organisation. So I'm under the impression that the initial approach to the council must come from a community organisation, and of course we, as a local authority, we have set boundaries for community councils and other organisations within that. Just to clarify that, Tony, and also there's another point I want to make on the broader point.
Yeah, just to you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Scott. Yeah, the consultation paper identifies that a community body is defined as either a community council or a body that meets the definition in the Community Empowerment Act. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within the confines of a community council. It could be something within that community council, I guess, or that community council area, or something separate.
Oh, okay, Graham.
I mean, it's on the broader sort of Scottish Government move. This is part of the sort of political empowerment agenda. I've got to be honest, I expect Peter to go through the all in the garden is lovely approach and understand that. But many of the community empowerment aspects are in reality gimmicks. They will not deliver what the community think they're going to do. Many of the people who I've spoken to who were talking about local police plans, they don't want to be involved in a local police plan to build things. They want to be involved in local planning to stop things. So the idea that this is a glorious exercise in community empowerment, in many ways there's a more darker and negative side to it. Another danger is that local police plans could be contradictory or offer contradictions to the actual local plan. And within that, to the more spatial regional type planning. As somebody who was chair of the structure plan for 5 years, there has to be dovetailing from local police plans to even broader regional plans. So the idea that the one place like Larkhall can just flourish on its own, independent of everyone else, is not quite true. And many of these community empowerment actually gimmicks that come from the Scottish Government are exactly that. They're gimmicks to give the impression of a broader empowerment and a broader consultation, but they will not achieve much and don't do much long term.
Thanks, Graham. I'll bring Pauline in at that point.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, not to steal Tony's thunder, he's already said it really is a formally constituted body, such as a community council. You're right, but it could be a community body constituted just to deliver a local police plan. Members are very much concentrating for obvious reasons, because your local ward members very much concentrating on geographical areas, but you could have a community of interest. For example, you could have a group from a wider area who are looking for a site to build a sports facility, and that might be a large sports facility that serves a number of local areas. So there is that as well. It's not just about communities of place, there's communities of interest to kind of add the dimension into that. I agree to some extent with Councillor Scott about it being very, very much easier to get people exercised and engaged to stop development rather than to try and deliver it. And we know that from what we look at on the planning committee. But I still think a proactive approach to try and involve communities, whether of place or of interest, at an early stage, has to be looked at and is by and large a positive thing. Although they do have to understand that this is about where development goes and different places where development goes. It's as Councillor Scott said, it's not intended to stop development. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pauline. Bert, you want to go in now?
Yes, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Right. I just, thinking about this, in Blantyre we've got several tenants and residents group, a very active community council. We've also got other groups like Friends of the Calder, etc. But we've got so many people and a lot of good things come from. But what you'll find in A groups and other groups in other areas as well is the same people attend everything. And I just want to think, if there's got to be any consultation or anything expanding on this, we've got to encourage younger people and other people to be involved And I'll give an example. We had one at the Community Council last year. Officers were kind enough to attend to do with community empowerment and what have you. And what I basically was about 60,000 quid with the officers. And I asked what budget they're deciding on for Blantyre, it was only about £20,000. So I think economics and reality have got to be put in check here, what they can do, what they can't. And we definitely must get other people and more diversity involvement. I really think that.
Thank you, Bert. Mary, do you want to come in there?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I support the community involvement and the Empowerment Act, helping them to come on. What we would identify as something that is maybe not what the community would identify, but I think it's breaking down the barriers where it used to always come from the top down, that we're trying to come from the bottom up and be more organic with this. And I think that's to be supported by communities. One of the questions within there is that the community councils, the maps where community councils operate, who agrees that mapping, that's the area for a community council and they can't go beyond that, because we've got issues in Hill House that they're wanting to help other communities, but because of the map that there would be 3 areas, they can't do that. They have to stay within the one area, and they were looking for guidance and help with that.
Tony, do you want to come in at that point?
I would like to, but I don't know the answer to that question, I must admit. What I will do, though, I'll go with Councillor Donnelly and speak to Rhonda Leith, who's the Community Participation Manager, see if she can help me out. And just, she might know about the query you've just raised there about Hill House, but I'll speak to Rhonda initially and get back to you, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks. Graham, did you want to come back in? Graham, you're on mute.
No, I'm fine, thank you. Just a legacy hand, my apologies.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 15, that's planning and building standards, consultation, communication and engagement strategy. That's in pages 213 to 230. And Tony will speak to that one as well. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. And it actually follows on quite nicely from the previous report. We talked about the Planning Act 2019 aiming to empower communities to make decisions, support and sustain them. So in terms of that, as I said, the planning service is starting to work much more closely with the community participation team. That's to ensure that the two elements synergise together. So as a bit of background, planning and building standards both have achieved customer service excellence recognition annually since 2014. And that's a way of measuring how we progress towards achieving customer service. Annually, before lockdown, we used to hold an annual event with developers and agents. And one of the key actions from the event, in the last event in 2019, was a commitment to produce an action plan to set out how the service would improve and develop engagement with stakeholders and to address the issues that identified that day. And then we then considered it would be good practice to formalise this into a formal consultation, communication and engagement strategy that would serve all of our communities and communities of interest. So we started preparation of the draft strategy before you did in last autumn. It was used as evidence for the last customer service excellence review back in January this year, and it was well received by the assessor. So we've continued to build on that, and we've developed into a point where we've put this version to yourselves today. It involves both the strategy, but also a fairly comprehensive action plan that we intend to address and implement over the coming 12 months. So we're recommending today, it's really just for noting, I suppose, that this is our way forward. to try and establish and make sure that as a planning service we are going to be meeting the aspirations of the government in terms of engaging communities a lot better when it comes to communities. And the strategy will be reviewed every 3 years. The action plan will be updated annually. And it will cover the lifetime of the strategy as well. So the recommendation, Chair, is just for members to note the strategy and the action plan and for them to endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Bert?
You're on mute.
Right, can you hear us okay now? Yeah, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Right, thanks. I've always believed in listening and only be listening. There's an old friend of mine that told me about this, Tom McCabe. Only be really listening can we then deliver or give the community, our groups, our people, our individuals what they want. And I do believe in that. But at the same time, I do believe that as councillors, we're elected to represent people. And I wonder, we're stripping away that much. Have we got to have anything left to do? Just a wee worry of mine, thanks.
Thanks, Bert. Do you want to come in that, Tony?
No. Don't think so, no. Thanks, Chair.
It must be noted, Chair, that Tony's an old friend of mine for years ago. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, I welcome the fact that we are going to go down this road of consultation and continually listening approach. But one of the issues that always irritates me through planning and irritates some of the communities I represent is the lack of enforcement, or enforcement takes forever and a day. And you find that you go to building control or the enforcement officers within planning and they say, well, we're very limited in what we can do. Now, I understand that the developers would not be keen on more enforcement powers, but the communities that we represent through community councils and other groups, that's usually where they come into contact with developers when an issue arises. So I would hope as part of that listening process that we're going to go down, Tony, that there is a listening to issues about enforcement and how either it's going to be pursued either at a national level, or is there anything we can do at a local level to take into consideration these issues that are raised by the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Tony?
Yeah, to you, Chair. I suppose, the enforcement powers that we have available are very much set by legislation, and they are limited. I think sometimes customers, communities think we have much greater power to intervene than we actually do. We do have the power to serve notices when it comes to a point where we're not going to get anywhere with an actual developer. So there is that backdrop and that ability to do that. I think as well, I can't remember whether the last committee or the committee before, we did bring to use the revised enforcement charter, which sets the scene for how we investigate complaints. And we do try and work with landowners, developers, but also the local community to try and reach a point where there's agreement between parties, rather than go. There's the ability to serve a notice when it's a severe issue, but we do try and negotiate and come to an acceptable outcome to customers and communities where we can. But say we review that charter every 2 years. We'll take on board and take stock of what's happened in the last 2 years when we come to review that again at the time.
Thank you, Tony. Richard?
Thanks, Chair. Just a point, I don't know, I find it sometimes confusing to follow the link between planning decisions and the environmental services part of our lives. I often wonder whether there's enough coordination. I know that they have to work together, but when planning decisions are reached, I've no doubt environmental services have been party to that decision. But I wonder whether we can establish perhaps, I don't know, more formal links between environmental services and planning. It's really following on David's point. It's trying to, if you like, establish a degree of control of what the local community has on what is happening. And if planning hasn't got powers and has to wait for environmental services, who may be months or years behind, then it makes it very difficult for us to operate on a local basis effectively.
I think just to you, Chair, I suppose that we consult environmental services on quite a range of applications, so we always get their views on proposals, and often that leads to conditions being attached to permissions. But we do actually have a very good relationship with our colleagues in environmental services, and it's often the case, their remit is a much wider one, a different one to ours, and their legislation, and it's sometimes the case that they can intervene much more quickly and much more effectively than planning can. So we do try and use our tools effectively. So if planning can intervene quickly, we would ask environmental services, for example, to use their powers as appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Alec?
Thanks, Chair. Going back to where David started from, and I was support of Tony, what he said, the planning I've found has been very helpful in the past in trying to work and sort out various issues that we have within the ward. But one of the problems we do find is the length of time it can take from an issue arising and enforcement action being taken with, as Tony said, them trying to work with a developer. Too often the developer will move an inch simply to get you off his back. Nothing happens. And it ends up that the local community have issues in their doorstep for not just days, weeks, but it can be up to years. And I think it's that time scale that we're perhaps needing to look at more, the one from when an issue is highlighted to when we get a satisfactory conclusion. It seems to drift along in that time with seemingly things happening, but no real outcome. I think I would like to see something more to regulate that period.
Okay, thank you. Tony, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I accept what Councillor Allison's saying, yes. In our current enforcement charter, we do have a three-tier system, if you like, so high, medium, and low priority cases. I think we said at the time that the number of cases we've received over the last 12 months during lockdown has gone up by about 50%. So we're always struggling to try and use our resources effectively. And I think we're going to try and use them a bit better going forward. So the cases that you're talking about, Councillor Allison, that affects the wider community, we will prioritise. There's some things that we just don't think are in the public interest to take very far. And I think we're going to be a bit more focused on how we deal with that going forward. So hopefully you will see a better outcome in the near future.
Thank you, Tony. I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you all very much. I don't have any other urgent items of business, so I'd like to thank you all very much for your attendance, and can I ask Stuart to please turn off the recording? Thank you. Take care.